Chapter 413. A big demon and a sage are sitting here and watching while a Kenzo swordsman is killing people. Li Yunxin laughed. What kind of world is this? Li Yunxin said this when dozens of blood pillars rose from the crowd for the first time. He saw Tian, who was standing at the entrance of the tent, trembling slightly. But he did not turn around and run, nor did he kneel down to beg for mercy. For a person who relied on his father's power to become a lackey at a young age, this was a very good performance. However, Zhou Xian was still sitting on the small bed. His eyes were lifeless as he stared outside without saying a word. Although he was separated by the military tent, he could still see the situation outside. A layer of cowhide could not hide the sight of the Grand Supreme Sage, even if he was once a sage. So Li Yunxin shook his head slightly. The people who killed people are your disciples and disciples. What does your old leader have to say? Zhou Xian knew what the words lead and guide meant. So he also roughly knew the meaning of the words. He was silent for a while and then said, "They are no longer cultivators or human beings." He frowned as if he had to use all his courage and strength to continue speaking and not let himself fall into a troubled mood. "I've said it before, they've all gone down the wrong path. Alas, demons. When birds and beasts live for a long time, they are called demons. Humans. When they live for a long time, they become demons and they are called demons. They, and the old me, are no longer human beings. They are just demons. The higher the level of cultivation, the more they are no different from demons." Li Yunxin was a little surprised. "Oh, great minds think alike. I told you that those high-level Taoist priests are no different from demons. Hearing you say the same today, I can see that my evaluation is appropriate." At this moment, the Taoist priest began to kill people one by one. Pillars of blood shot up one after another, but Li Yunxin just watched. Zhou Xian also watched for a while. But finally, he gritted his teeth and forced himself to speak. Why didn't you save him? He is only a swordsman at the peak of transcendent state." Li Yunxin stood at the entrance of the tent with his hands behind his back. After a while, he said faintly in the darkness, "I'm saving more people." "Save him like this?" "Yes." He turned to glance at Zhou Xian. "Everyone in the world thinks that Daotong and Kenzo are the righteous ones, the protectors. Now that so many people had gathered in the Heavenspan swamp, they could finally get close to these immortals. Therefore you can clearly see what kind of trash the immortals in their hearts are. Some of the demons in the mountains even pretend to be river gods, mountain gods, and earth gods to do some good deeds. These immortals." Li Yunxin grinned. "They're too lazy to pretend. But it's also reasonable. They don't want emotions anymore, so they won't even think about pretending. That's why. If we don't kill more of them now, how will they know how savage these immortals are?" Li Yunxin narrowed his eyes. "They're dying for the people of the world. Killing them is saving them." Zhou Xian suddenly pounded the bed. Would it be better if the demons were the righteous ones? Maybe it was because the saint had found some strong emotions that he cared so much about the lives of mortals. But the strange thing was that he didn't want to do anything himself and only talked to Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin laughed out loud. "Are you kidding me? These demons at least have some order and know not to get involved in the affairs of the mortal world. What about the demons? I'm afraid they'll have to rush into the city and feast on human flesh for 3 days and 3 nights. How can it be better?" Zhou Xian was taken aback. He didn't expect Li Yunxin to say something like this. He frowned. "Then you," Li Yunxin sighed and turned to look at him. "Xianmen is also a bastard and so are the demons. But that bastard Xianmen is doing better, so he's the one in charge. But whether you're doing well is one thing and whether they know your true colors is another. So..." He shrugged and curled his lips. "I don't like people pretending to be mysterious. At least let people know what kind of person you are and then they have a choice, right? It's better than one day when this bastard is worse than that bastard and suddenly realizes that they're not good people. But it's too late." Zhou Xian carefully thought about his words for a while and his frown deepened. "What do you want to do?" Li Yunxin smiled. "Nothing, I just like to stir up trouble." "Aren't you always stirring up trouble? What are you going to do after you find your emotions?" Zhou Xian didn't say anything. After half an hour he said, "So you're not going to save these people?" At this time, Dayakizi had finished killing people. And the more than 40 Qing soldiers began to loudly shout, "We are guilty." However, it was hard to hear a truly guilty person shout as righteously and passionately as they did. Their voices were one after another, almost breaking through the darkness. But the smell of blood in the darkness had not dissipated. Every soldier's face was covered in red dots. If someone raised their hand, wiped their face, or wiped their eyes, it would leave a bright red mark. Everyone was silent. Only these dying people were shouting, and the cold swordsman was listening quietly. When these people's voices were all hoarse, the swordsman let out a light breath. Good. You have admitted your crimes. Then you should know that there are no demon kings or ghost emperors. Speaking to this point, he stretched out and raised his voice. His fingertips emitted a faint white light, bright but not dazzling. This light gently spread out in all directions like water ripples. With each word he said, the water ripples trembled and formed a strange connection with him. An hour ago, everyone on the scene would think this was a miracle. But now everyone's gazes towards Xianguang had become extremely complicated. They were all stupid people of the secular world. Most of them came from poor families. They could not eat their fill and wear their clothes warm. They joined the army to support their families. In the past they had heard some things related to the Xianmen in the fields. In their hearts, they longed for and envied the Sendo who rode clouds to and fro in the sky to enlighten people and subdue demons. Many people knew that the task of transporting red earth to Tongtian swamp was dangerous, but there was something else in their hearts that made them able to endure many dangers. These stupid people did not know how to describe those things. They only knew that when they thought about how the things they were going to deliver could help the Sendo subdue demons, restore peace to the world, and work for the welfare of the common people, a slightly trembling warmth surged in their hearts. If it was called by a scholar, this thing was called faith. Tonight this thing was broken. Many simple-minded people realized that what they had once worshipped as gods and were willing to fight for in reality did not exist. Moreover, they could vaguely sense that the light and ripples on Sendo, as fingertips were trying to take something away from their minds. Thus the people became slightly restless again. Tu Wuyu noticed this sign. At this moment his inner armor was completely soaked in sweat and stuck to his body. When he moved slightly, the cold air of the autumn night seeped in through the gaps in his armor, making him shiver. He lowered his voice and said, "Sendo, something is wrong. Hurry up or I'm going to die here." But the Dochsi ignored him. He also ignored the restless mortals. He jumped off the horse, but his feet did not touch the ground. It was as if there was an invisible path in the air to receive him. He stepped on that path and walked toward the 40-odd people who were about to die. His clothes and sleeves fluttered as he walked behind Ding Min. He raised a hand and said, "Like gold, Yu Shiwei." This seemed to be a magic incantation. Following the magic incantation, his finger lightly tapped on Ding Min's head. The immortal aura poured into this mortal's body. No mortal could withstand such power. It was just like how no bottle could contain the entire ocean. His eyes did not linger on Ding Min. He took a step away, tapped on Su Mao's head and chanted the second magic incantation, "Cure in 6 days." However, he did not finish the last word. The swordsman frowned and turned his head slightly to the right. Ding Min was not dead. He was stunned, not knowing why this happened. But he still reached out and tapped on Ding Min's head again. Still there was no reaction. The swordsman made a soft sound of surprise. The person being tortured also noticed something was wrong. Ding Min suddenly raised her head and stared at the Dochsi. She laughed loudly. "Ha, you can't kill me. God has opened his eyes." The Dochsi snorted coldly. "I am your god." Then he reached out for the third time. Then there was a clear and distant slap. In this cold and quiet autumn night it sounded like a whip. Just like the swordsman's previous words, it passed into everyone's ears and made them feel refreshed. Sounded like the slap was made by someone's face at an extremely fast speed and with great force. It was indeed so. A figure in a white robe suddenly appeared in front of Ding Min, as if he had been standing there all the time. As soon as the Dochsi's voice faded away, he was slapped in the face. The swordsman's body was like a kite with a broken string. He flew a few meters away, rolled 3 times on the ground and was covered with dirt mixed with blood. Bullsh *T. The man in white coldly looked at the swordsman on the ground. "Do you think I don't exist?" Thus the huge drill ground fell into an eerie silence once again. Many people tried to rush forward when the Dochsi put his finger on Ding Min's head for the first time. However, there were so many people that they could only push forward a few steps. At this time these people were so stunned that they even forgot to push. There were more people who were cursing in a low voice or sobbing. However, at this moment their voices were stuck in their throats and could not come out. Chapter 4:14. Tonight they first saw the cultivator they regarded as an immortal cruelly and mercilessly kill his own comrade. However, the cultivator was so powerful that their most intense resistance would only result in death. Then they saw the powerful and invincible cultivator. Suddenly they were sent flying by a slap. The soldiers were stunned, but Tu Wuyu was not. From beginning to end, he had been trying to find a way to escape from this chaos that had long gone out of his control. Until now, when he saw this scene, he could only widen his eyes. Then he realized that regardless of whether the white-clothed man was friend or foe, this was not a place to stay for long. Thus he jumped off his horse, took off his helmet and shouted to the soldier beside him, "Go! Go now!" Then he squeezed into the crowd, but it seemed that he ran into an iron wall. Tu Wuyu raised his head and saw his soldier's face was ashen. He pressed his lips into a thin line and stared at him expressionlessly. Behind the soldier there were more eyes like this. Ding Min raised her head and opened her mouth slightly. The 40-odd people beside her had the same expression. They were not surprised that they had been rescued. They were surprised that Li Yunxin, the demon, dared to appear here. This was the camp of the allied army, and the person he had sent flying was a Kenzo cultivator. This place and the Black Tower not far away were the front lines of the attack on the demons. How dare he? However, Li Yunxin responded with a smile. He turned his head to look at the Qing soldiers who had escorted them, and they immediately ran away in fear, leaving these criminals here. I came too late. Li Yunxin's smile became somewhat sorrowful. He sighed and helped Ding Min up by his arm. He looked at the slightly wet ground and said, "This dog Taoist has harmed so many people. If I had come any later, even you would have been killed by him. If that really happened, how would I live in the future?" Ding Min still could not speak. The soldiers around them were already whispering to each other, trying to guess the identity of the person who had appeared. Yan Er stood up and turned around to find Tu Wuyu, who was surrounded and unable to escape. He raised his eyebrows and shouted, "Open your dog eyes." As he spoke, he pointed at Li Yunxin. "Demon King. He is the Demon King." As soon as these words came out, the crowd was in an uproar. Exclamations with complicated meanings swept through the crowd like a hurricane. Yan Er looked at Dao Qizi in the distance and his voice became even more indignant. "So what if he's a demon king? Even demons are more affectionate and loyal than you stinky Taoist priests in human skin. He's here to save our lives." At this moment, Dao Qizi had climbed up from the ground. He had been in a daze for a short while, because he had never suffered such humiliation. With a slight shake of his sleeve, the mud and blood on his body turned into smoke and dissipated, revealing his unwrinkled Taoist robe once again. However, the swelling and bruise on the left side of his face did not disappear. Ever since he reached the transcendent state and stabilized his body, he had never suffered any wounds on his body. But now that he had been ambushed, his mouth actually reeked of blood. At this moment Yan Er pointed at him and scolded, "You're all the same, the same." That Kong Tongzi was so scared that he knelt down and begged for mercy when he saw a demon. This bastard distorted the truth and killed indiscriminately. If Daotong and Kenzo are all like this, I think those demon kings and ghost emperors are the real heroes. After walking on the edge of life and death and seeing so many of his comrades die for them, Yan Er, who was young, could no longer choose his words. But although his words were extreme, they resonated with many people. Seeing such an injustice happening in their own camp, they had long been blinded by it. How could they think of anything else? They only knew that the Kenzo swordsman treated human lives as worthless. However, the words of the demon that Yan Er spoke of were sincere and had the demeanor of a hero. In the past, the demons in everyone's mind were ferocious and ferocious. Now that they saw Li Yunxin's handsome and dignified appearance, the image in their minds was overturned. Immediately their voices were like thunder as they echoed. "What bullsh*t Taoist? It's obviously a demon sect. I've been deceived by them for so many years. I'm not going to work for them," and other similar words flew into the sky like a storm, and could be heard clearly from miles away. The situation that was originally under his control was suddenly reversed, and he was really condemned by thousands of filthy mortals who used to think of him as ants. Even the cold and distant Taoist Qizi's heart burned with a long-lost anger. As for the identity of this Li Yunxin, What demon king? Which demon king was tired of living and dared to appear less than 10 miles away from the Black Tower where cultivators gathered? Thus he was so angry that he turned his palm and took out a small sword that was transparent but had a hidden brilliance. He shouted sternly, "Which sect is this ruffian from? How dare you come here and cause trouble? Do you know what this is in my hand?" The small sword in his hand was indeed a treasure. In the long history of the Taoist sect, there were nearly 200 sword saints. Each of these nearly 200 sword saints would leave behind 2 or 3 treasures that they refined, so the number of treasures was quite considerable. The sword in his hand was the treasure left by the 167th sword saint, named Wuxia, which was used to break all kinds of restrictive arrays. This thing should not belong to a cultivator at the peak of the transcendent state. However, Taoist Chizi had said before that he was a cultivator of the 5-sword sect stationed on Cloud Mountain. This meant that he was a Taoist born on Cloud Mountain. In fact, his parents' status was even higher than that of Jin Guangzi, the head of the 5-sword sect, so it was not surprising that he had this treasure. Therefore he still had the courage to shout after being hit by a palm. Moreover, although he was hit by a palm just now, since it was a sneak attack, it didn't hurt him, which showed that the opponent's cultivation level was also ordinary. When he spoke before, the whole crowd was silent. But now when he spoke, the crowd was stirred up. His shout was quickly drowned by the noise of the crowd, like a drop of water in the ocean. So he was even angrier. He suddenly raised his sword and pointed at the crowd. "Shut up." The sword energy of a cultivator at the peak of the transcendent state was invisible, but it had a terrible killing power. If this attack hit, the hundreds of people in its path would be turned into a pile of meat paste. However, just like when he wanted to kill Ding Min, no one died. The spiritual energy he forced out of his body disappeared without a trace, like a clay ox entering the sea. Seeing him attack, the soldiers' hearts turned cold and their voices also became low. But now that he had failed, they knew that the so-called Demon King was protecting them. After a while they became even more noisy, their voices even louder than before. Of course Taoist Chizi knew that. So he turned his head and glared at Li Yunxin. "Fine. You block it. Let's see if you can block my flying sword." As soon as he finished speaking, he made a sword gesture. The small sword immediately turned into a stream of light, and went straight for Li Yunxin's face. But Li Yunxin didn't panic. Not only did he not panic, but he also put his left hand behind his back. He turned his right hand and a folding fan appeared in his palm. It was almost the same as the one he had transformed from his palace. Then he took a step forward and lightly waved the folding fan in his hand. With a buzzing sound, the flying sword that had transformed into a streak of light was immediately sent flying back, spinning 7 or 8 times. Taoist Chizi clenched his teeth and made another sword gesture. But Li Yunxin seemed to be taking a stroll in the courtyard. He moved his feet slightly and the folding fan in his hand was waving. He easily dissolved Taoist Chizi's fierce attack, as if the sharp sword light was just a dead leaf falling with the wind in the autumn night. He was walking on the moon in the night and he just brushed off all the dead leaves that fell on his body. While he was fighting casually, the mortals were stunned. Taoist Chizi's attack was so fast that it looked like a waterfall in the eyes of mortals. It was like thousands of raindrops falling on Li Yunxin's face, but he couldn't get close to him. This scene had far exceeded the limits of their imagination. Cultivators and demons rarely revealed their mystiques in front of mortals. Tonight was perhaps the first time in this world that so many people had witnessed the mystiques of cultivators and demons at the same time. What was it like? In just 3 breaths, Taoist Chizi had already made more than 600 attacks. At this moment he desperately realized that, when he sneaked up on him, this person didn't use his full strength. He also realized that even if he made another 6,000 stabs, he wouldn't be able to break a corner of that person's clothes. However, the most frightening thing was, that person was actually casually blocking his flying swords while walking towards him step by step. Taoist Chizi naturally wanted to escape and put some distance between them. However, at this moment his chi was firmly locked by that person, and he had exhausted all his strength just to launch an attack. How could he have the strength to retreat? If he retreated at this moment, his breath would be stagnant. That person would be in front of him the next moment. His heart was filled with indescribable fear, shock, defeat, and humiliation that he had never felt before. It was just a few breaths, but it felt as long as 10,000 years. But Taoist Qizi's fear and contradiction didn't last long. When he made the 1223rd stabs, Li Yunxin finally approached him. Then he casually threw the folding fan to block the last sword and raised his hand again. Bang! A bruise appeared on the right side of Taoist Qizi's face. As a result, the sword light storm stopped and the flying sword fell to the ground with a clatter. Taoist Qizi seemed to be stunned. He just stared at Li Yunxin with his eyes wide open and didn't even know how to move. After 3 breaths, his Adam's apple moved up and down, and he stared at the folding fan on the ground. You? His voice trembled, carrying a heavy nasal tone. What magic treasure is this? Li Yunxin looked at him calmly. A bamboo fan bought in the market of City of Wei. 2 coins for 1. After another 2 breaths, Taoist Qizi's eyes suddenly became moist. Then a lot of tears gushed out and covered half of his face. What the hell? He cried like a child. Who the hell are you? Why do you fight against me? Then the drill ground became silent again. But the silence only lasted for a moment. The next moment, a roar of laughter like a landslide and a tsunami, even covering the sound of hooves in the distance. I've already said it. Li Yunxin bent down to pick up the flying sword on the ground and weighed it in his hand. Then he walked behind Taoist Qizi, but the crying swordsman didn't react at all. It seemed that something in his heart was broken and scattered, or he himself fell into a terrible predicament. I'm the Demon King. He cut the swordsman's throat with the flying sword and blood gushed out. Wei River Dragon King. Chapter 4:15. Only now did the swordsman begin to struggle. However, Li Yunxin grabbed his hair bun and cut off his head completely. No one laughed. They hated the swordsman Dao Qizi. But they had never thought he would actually die. Die in front of them. Like a chicken waiting to be slaughtered, he had his head cut off. The drill ground was silent. But the sound of hooves came from the distance and dust rose up. The strange situation in the Qing North camp was finally detected. It seemed that other troops had come to suppress it. Li Yunxin held Dao Qizi's head in his hand and turned around so that everyone could see it clearly. Then he casually threw the head to the ground. A cultivator's life is a life, and a soldier's life is also a life, he said to the silent Qing soldiers. However, his rotten life is not worthy of all of you brave men. These 2 short sentences immediately caused these soldiers to widen their eyes, clench their fists, and exhale scorching hot air from their nostrils. Li Yunxin took another 2 steps on the field and said, I am a demon king. I am the Wei River Dragon King. Do you all want to know why I am here? The people on the field were all Qing soldiers. Which Qing soldier did not know of the Wei River? Next to it was the world-famous city of Wei, but it was rumored to have been destroyed. As for the Wei River Dragon King, only those who lived in the counties near the city of Wei knew of him. Fortunately, among these 1,000 people, there were many who had lived there before. Titles such as Demon and Wei River Dragon King would be terrifying and unreachable if one only heard them from others. But now, seeing Li Yunxin say that he was pleasing to the eye and had defended the injustice of others, even if there was fear in their hearts before, it was now very faint. Thus many people cried out, I have heard of the Wei River Dragon King. Are you the Dragon King? Are you a dragon? Are you really a demon? There was no malice in these questions. They were just curious. However, Li Yunxin sighed softly. Of course I'm a dragon. Naturally it's Dragon King. The autumn night was cold. When he sighed, his breath turned into frost. However, the mist exhaled by an ordinary person quickly dissipated. However, the mist in his mouth was rising in spirals and becoming thicker. In just 2 or 3 breaths of time, half of his body was shrouded in the clouds. And so, everyone saw scales and horns. The dark green scales were faintly discernible in the mist, making a zha-zha sound. A pair of bright red antlers, identical to the dragon antlers in the painting, was also revealed under the lingering golden light. Li Yunxin revealed part of his god-fiend body and hid his slender pupils and sharp fangs in the mist. And so, the crowd gasped in shock. This was the first time most people had seen the true form of a demon. No, the true form of the Dragon King. In just 2 breaths of time, at least 100 people knelt down. It's really the Dragon King. Such low and awe-inspiring words spread quickly among the crowd. I'm in charge of Wei River, driving clouds and bringing rain and farming. Wei River Dragon King paced slowly in the mist, so the clouds moved with his steps. For the vast majority of mortals, this scene was the most intuitive and comprehensible appearance of an immortal. I've protected the city of Wei and the land for thousands of years. The vast Dongting was my temporary imperial residence. However, you should know that the city of Wei was burned and the Dongting was destroyed. Li Yunxin's voice sounded majestic and desolate. What did you hear? Did the demon destroy the city of Wei and the Dongting? No. He shouted in a low voice. With this shout, thick clouds gathered in the sky, and a lightning flashed and disappeared. The roar of thunder that followed was a footnote to his words. The earth trembled slightly because of the thunder. Another 100 people knelt down. As this was the Dragon King. It was the Taoist of Daotong who coveted the treasures in my dragon palace. So he destroyed the city of Wei and sacrificed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people to refine the magic circle. And my dragon palace was also destroyed, so I ended up here. Lightning flashed in the sky one after another, making the ground as bright as daytime. In the dazzling light, Li Yunxin shouted, Taoism shepherds tens of thousands of people, but what did they give you? They only gave you death and fear. But where are the Dragon King, the mountain god, and the land that many of you worship? What do you think they are? Are they the gods that those Taoists conferred? Li Yunxin raised his eyes and looked at the distant sky. Many streamers were coming here. The cultivators on the Black Tower felt the soaring demon power here and also came. But he didn't care and continued to shout, They are not gods, they are demons like me. These words made many people raise their heads in surprise. The demons and the celestial sect of wonders already knew about this. But mortals didn't know. Taoism tells you that demons are cruel, cunning, and heinous. Humph. When he said this, his voice was like thunder and people could hear him clearly from a mile away. At the same time he summoned the clouds and rain. The incessant flashes of lightning illuminated the drill ground, making his figure even more distinct. When the soldiers who had rushed over from other camps saw this scene, how could they still care about suppressing the enemy? They only knew that it was the Shinryu king and it was too late to worship him. Taoism always regarded these mortals as ants. Even if they transported the red soil to Tongtian swamp, they didn't bother to tell these ordinary soldiers the details. Now the consequences of doing this were gradually revealed. In the hearts of these ignorant mortals, Lord Dragon King was not someone that should be defeated. But now you have a good look at how the Taoism that shepherds tens of thousands of people kills people, and how the cruel and cunning demons protect you. As she said this, the figures of the cultivators could be seen on the top of the sky. The cultivators were high up in the sky and Li Yunxin was standing in the light of the lightning. A voice came down from the sky, Li Yunxin, how dare you? You dare to come here to seek death. You dare to show your true form in front of these ignorant mortals. This voice belonged to someone he knew. Golden light. Thick clouds rolled, lightning flashed, thunder roared and wind blew. Li Yunxin raised his head and laughed bravely, his voice like rolling thunder. Show my true form? Ah. You hypocrites can fool the people of the world, but can't I, the Shinryu king, show my divinity in front of the people of the world? Your Kenzo swordsmen came to the Qing camp to massacre people and were killed by me. These thousands of people saw it with their own eyes. Do you want to kill them as well, just like you did in the city of Wei? As soon as his voice fell, the thousands of people immediately shouted. Earlier, the son of the Taoist priest had tortured and killed their comrades in front of them, which had already made everyone angry. Now hearing these words from the Dragon King and hearing the words of the immortals in the sky, the anger in their hearts grew. Even their fear was thrown out the window. What had happened earlier spread quickly from the mouths of the Qing soldiers to the soldiers who had come to suppress them, and then through them to other places. The son of the Taoist priest had come to the Qing camp to deal with this matter. His previous methods were cruel and did not care about the consequences because there would not be any consequences. In his eyes, the memories of the Qing soldiers would sooner or later be erased by him using his magical powers. Then if he was more ruthless, it would save a lot of trouble. In the end they would all forget. However, who would have thought? There was really a great demon of the true realm who came to the Qing camp. At this moment the matter had become troublesome. Even with the golden light and several cultivators present, it was still troublesome. Because there was a Wei River Dragon King on the ground. The cultivators at the peak of the true realm could use magical powers to solve the problem, and the people in the sky might be able to solve the problem for more people. However, with Li Yunxin there, he probably would not quietly watch them use magical powers. Magical powers related to essence, qi and spirit were always troublesome. Otherwise, the son of the Taoist priest would not have gone through so much trouble to force Ding Min and the others to admit their guilt. They could be killed just like in the city of Wei. The Taoists of the Langya Grotto had killed hundreds of thousands of people in the city of Wei, and there were only tens of thousands of people near the Qin camp. The problem was that the city of Wei was an isolated city. In this era, the city of Wei was an unusually prosperous city. However, transportation was not convenient, and the spread of information was even more difficult. The Taoists surrounded the city of Wei and killed everyone. There were no signs of human habitation within dozens of li, so it was difficult for people to know the inside story. Then they pushed the blame to the demons and no one in the world dared to say no. However, this was the main camp of the Allied army. Unless they could kill everyone here, the matter would get out sooner or later. Thus, after Li Yunxin shouted angrily, the thick clouds in the sky were silent for a moment. Those ignorant soldiers did not know the inside story. Seeing this, they shouted even louder. After 3 breaths, thousands of beams of light suddenly burst out from the dark clouds that covered the sky. A thick beam of light suddenly pierced through the thunderclouds and shone on the ground. People did not know what magic it was, but it looked righteous and majestic like a miracle. But tonight it was hard for anyone to accept such a miracle. A figure with fluttering robes slowly descended from the beam of light. Li Yunxin looked through the air and knew it was someone he knew. The Golden Light. The Golden Light stopped him at the border between the Qin kingdom and the Yi kingdom. She even used her magical power to kill Yu Meng's maid. If Yu Meng had not recovered her memory because of the star formation under Changji town and taken away her magic weapon, things would have been a bit more terrible. That day when the Golden Light retreated, she was already very old. But tonight when he saw her again, she had returned to her former graceful and luxurious appearance, and even better than before. She stood high in the sky, and the scattered light almost illuminated the whole drill ground as if it were daytime. Another 3 cultivators also descended from the sky and lined up around her. Immediately, auspicious clouds appeared in the sky, and celestial music floated. It was just a trivial trick of cultivators, but in the eyes of mortals on the ground, it was a magnificent trick of immortals. So this trick worked. The voices of the angry people instantly quieted down. Before, when Li Yunxin revealed half of his demon body, it was to let these people see the appearance of the Dragon King, which shocked them greatly. Now this cultivator also showed his magical power in front of everyone, probably with the same idea. It was not for the reasons of holding up the scene or winning face, but because this Li Yunxin was a demon. Demons could enjoy the incense and wish power produced by faith. And what Li Yunxin had done in the city of Wei, the Golden Light had heard of it. He created a dragon cult and developed a group of fanatics almost able to compete with Yunzi. Now in this military camp. Earlier there was a Taoist cheesy who did something stupid and aroused public anger. Then this Li Yunxin showed his magical power, and immediately won the respect of these hot-blooded soldiers. Soldiers were originally more young and evil than ordinary people. Now that they were fanatically believing and spreading the news to more people, this Li Yunxin's cultivation would increase greatly, and he would become a bigger disaster. For tens of thousands of years, Daotong Kenzo had strictly guarded against big demons showing their divinity in the mortal world, because they were afraid of this. Seeing that the voices were getting softer, the Golden Light said, "Demon, don't talk nonsense. That Taoist cheesy was originally a rebel of Daotong, and has already entered the demonic path. He escaped from Yunshan to here, his demonic nature acted up and he started a massacre. I am also heartbroken. Now that our Daotong Kenzo is going to fight the demons, will we do such evil things at such a critical moment? Today, I guarantee with my identity as the leader of Wuxia sword sect, Xianmen will never do such things. If there is any falsehood in what I said, let my fate and inner demons act up immediately and I will die." Mortals naturally didn't know what fate and inner demons were. But after hearing the words leader of Wuxia sword sect, and seeing such an awe-inspiring aura, they knew that this immortal who had descended to the mortal world must have a high status, and was far from what Taoist cheesy could compare to. And when the Golden Light made this oath, the 3 people around him immediately cried out, "Leader Jinzi, how can you make such a vicious oath? So more people started to look at each other and other thoughts formed in their minds. Stupid mortals were always easy to fool and incite. Previously they believed in Xianmen, but encountered a cultivator from Xianmen who cruelly killed people. Then Dragon King appeared and followed their thoughts and emotions to stir up a wave of anger. But now that people saw such a scene and heard such words, the faith and reverence towards Xianmen that had accumulated in their hearts over the years slowly floated up again. So the voices became softer, but it made the thunder between heaven and earth even louder. However, Li Yunxin sneered, "Fate and inner demons? You are a wandering puppet of the Freemasonry, and you have occupied someone else's body. What kind of fate and inner demons are you talking about? Do you have those things?" He stood on the drill ground and sneered as he said these words. Following these words, a cold whirlwind gradually formed around him. The whirlwind wrapped around him and tore apart the clouds around him, blowing them into blade-like clouds. Following the transformation of the clouds and mist, his fiend god body suddenly underwent a miraculous transformation. Chapter 416. Originally, Long Jiao's scales were dark green in color, as if they were made of profound iron. But now, looking at Li Yunxin's scales, he found that a faint black-gold color seeped out from the ridge of each scale. Originally, the pair of antlers on his head had been blood-red with specks of golden light swirling around them. But now the golden light had disappeared. Instead, the tips of the two horns lit up with a faint golden light. It was as if the originally hard red horns were slowly turning into light. Wild demonic power began to gather in his body. The strength of this demonic power caused him to faintly show signs of breaking through the realm of enlightened Zhenren and advancing into the realm of enlightened Zhenren. However, this demonic power and wish power did not only come from the Qing army. How difficult was it to advance from the realm of enlightened Zhenren to the realm of enlightened Zhenren? Many cultivators spent their entire lives on this step and still found it difficult to take this step. Even with his rare talent, he had been stuck in the realm of enlightened Zhenren for many months. But at this moment, the moment the golden light appeared, other than the wish power from the soldiers in the camp, there was suddenly an even more powerful wave of demonic power wildly pouring into his body. He was familiar with this wave of demonic power. He had been heavily injured by the golden light earlier. These days he had been relying on this wave of demonic wish power to slowly heal the wounds in his body. It was the power of incense and wish that Mu Nanju and the others had promised him for the temple he had set up along the Wei River. He didn't know what had happened along the Wei River at this moment. An unstoppable power suddenly gathered from all directions. In an instant, it allowed him to touch the edge of the mysterious realm of enlightened Zhenren. It was as if Mu Nanju's people had long prepared for this moment. At this time, Li Yunxin did not have the mind to think about whether there were any other goals or intentions behind this matter. He was more willing to believe that at this point in time, Mu Nanju had seen something that was extremely beneficial to them. Thus he had used the method he had prepared earlier. Li Yunxin was not someone who would easily trust others. But since he had already cautiously given some of his limited trust to Mu Nanju, it meant that he had long thought this through and firmly believed that his judgment was not wrong. Thus, "Give me the power of the blue cloud and I transform into a dragon in the face of the wind." His body suddenly swelled up, shooting straight up into the sky. His 100-zhonglong body of the Qi-kissed dragon, accompanied by a burst of violent thunderclouds, suddenly appeared. How huge was the body of a dragon that was 1,000 feet long? The height of a person on the ground was only a fraction of his height. As soon as the dragon soared into the sky, it immediately scattered the magic clouds around the cultivators. Between the rolling thick clouds and the swimming electric snakes, a pair of huge eyes emitted a scorching golden light behind the clouds, like two suns moving stealthily in the dark night, illuminating the earth. The dragon's body, which was covered in black scales with a hint of gold, circled in the air. Every time the scales collided with each other, a dazzling bolt of lightning would appear. Every time the giant mouth breathed, it spat out a vast amount of mist. If the golden light descending from the thick clouds was said to be the scene of celestial music curling up in spirals, then at this moment, the scene of Qi Wen's true body appearing in the world was an unparalleled violent shock in the eyes of the people. The huge body of the dragon, the sturdy scales, the sharp claws and the rolling black clouds, represented the most primitive power and fear, the worship of the flesh and blood, the desire to kill, and the awe of the darkness. And for the thousands or even tens of thousands of soldiers in the camp who took killing and war as their profession, it was far more shocking and resonating than the magic clouds and celestial music. At the moment when Qi Wen appeared, the lightning flashed in the sky and the wind was raging on the ground. The huge body that pressed down almost made them forget to breathe. It was the first time that they saw such a mythical beast that was far beyond their imagination. How could these ordinary people have the ability to think? The might of the dragon race could even make fiendish demons tremble, let alone mortals. At this moment, among these soldiers, dozens or hundreds of people suddenly let out a cry full of awe. It's a dragon. It's Lord Dragon King. It's the Wei River Dragon King Qi Wen. After shouting these words, those people immediately fell to the ground and prostrated themselves in worship, not caring that in such a dense crowd, they might be trampled to death alive. And among these faces, perhaps one or two were familiar to Li Yunxin. He had seen them in the Munan house in Rong City or Wei City. Therefore, when the people who almost lost the ability to think because of extreme shock heard such a cry, they also subconsciously prostrated themselves in worship. For a moment, like the autumn wind sweeping through the wheat, more and more people knelt on the ground like waves, trembling and shouting, "Dragon!" Therefore, more stronger and more turbulent power of wish poured into the body of the huge dragon in the sky like an avalanche. The situation was already showing signs of getting out of control. The wild and violent dragon body steadily suppressed the immortal atmosphere, and the four cultivators in the sky were in a slightly awkward situation. Li Yunxin called out the name Freemasonry. However, among the four cultivators here, except for the gold photon, the other three were also members of the Freemasonry. In front of an insider like Li Yunxin, they no longer hid their true faces. The gold photon straightened up and stepped forward, facing Li Yunxin across the sky. The huge dragon body hovered in the clouds, and the gold photon's body also emitted a magnificent light, so that the people on the ground could see it clearly. Li Yunxin. She didn't care much about the other party's sarcasm. Before you were like a stray dog, and now you're here to instigate these mortals who don't know the truth. But that demon also can't tolerate you, so you're here to die? But after saying these words, she sent a voice transmission to third cultivator of true virtue who was behind her. Ji Tong, go back to the pagoda immediately and report the situation here. I'll deal with this Li Yunxin first. You go find another sect master to help me. Hearing her words, third cultivator of true virtue was stunned. Although these three cultivators were not at the true state, they were at the peak of the transcendent state. Although they were also at the peak of the transcendent state, they were different from Dao Qizi. Dao Qizi was a Taoist who lived in Cloud Mountain all year round and lived like a prince. But they were outer sect cultivators who had been cultivating for a long time and had more experience. When it came to fighting, all of them were good fighters. That was why they were stunned. They all knew that Gold Photon had been summoned by the two sages of Cloud Mountain. Not only did she recover her cultivation, but she also obtained many magic treasures and her strength skyrocketed. Moreover, Gold Photon had fought with that demon Li Yunxin before, so she was more experienced. Now that the four of them were dealing with Li Yunxin, how could they still ask for help? So the cultivator called Ji Tong by Gold Photon said, "Sect Master Gold Photon, is this necessary?" At this moment they were talking through each other's divine senses. They spoke a lot of words, but it only took a moment. This was because Gold Photon had a treasure that was given to her by the two sages. So she said, "Of course it is necessary. Don't you see that Li Yunxin has instigated so many foolish mortals, and now his power of faith has skyrocketed? He is a dragon's, and once he reaches the perfected state, it will be very difficult for me to deal with him." When Li Yunxin met Gold Photon at the border of Qinyi, this female cultivator was cold and arrogant. She was bossy to the other sect masters who were also at the true state, and even used them as consumables. But now she was talking to Taoist Ji Tong, who was only at the peak of the transcendent state, with great patience. It seemed that this Ji Tong also had a powerful background. But this Ji Tong seemed to want to get to the bottom of it. With the help of the magic treasures, their divine senses were extremely fast, and then she frowned and said, "Didn't Sect Master Gold Photon get a lot of treasures from the two sages? If you want to kill him, just use those treasures. Although he is a dragon's among the demons, he also knows how to cultivate. But after all, he is a true state cultivator. How can he defeat you? Kill him." Do you really think he is here to die? Gold Photon's patience was limited and now it was running out. While they were talking, they could see that the scales on Li Yunxin's body were glowing brightly, as if there was a dazzling golden light hidden under the dark scales, and it was about to shoot out. He is Dragon's son, and Dragon's son has always been at odds with each other. You should also know that there was news in the mountains that Li Yunxin had a falling out with that hatred, and the demons are looking for him. Now that he is here and so brazenly shows up here, do you think he is here to die or to find a way out? Gold Photon's eyes became a little more serious. Before I came to Mount Chuyun, the two sages also told me about this. If Li Yunxin really has the intention to join us, we have to temporarily calm him down and then make plans. Do you think I don't want to kill him? But the two sages have a long-term plan. So it's easy to kill him, but it's hard to suppress his arrogance and keep him alive. Do you want to see him motivate all the hundreds of thousands of people in this camp? The people in the pagoda still don't know the situation here. You go back and tell them about this and then call them here immediately. Hearing the name of the two sages, Ji Tongzi was a little more restrained. But he still seemed to be unwilling to give up and only muttered, "You and the two sages think like this, but how do you know it's not a trap set by Li Yunxin and the demons in the mountains?" He first pretended to spread the news of discord and then came to us like this. Gold Photon was annoyed and frowned. "You idiot, don't you know he killed Yujun in the mountains? Yujun is a big demon in the true state. Hey! You killed many true state leaders at the border of the Yi country, didn't you?" Ji Tongzi was also annoyed. "You can casually throw away the true state as a chess piece, but can't those demons kill Yujun to win your trust?" "Ji Tongzi, why are you mentioning these things to me now?" Gold Photon flew into a rage. "Fine. Today I'll teach you how to use your brain." Her voice was sharp, and it directly roared in the divine sense of third cultivator of true virtue. The other two didn't say anything and could only listen to their tit-for-tat argument. "I say this Li Yunxin really has a falling out with the demons, so he wants to come to Daotong. You say he told us to think so, that it's a trap they set up. You think you're smart, but do you think Li Yunxin is stupid? What if he also predicted that you would think so? You want to trap him again and again, and with your little intelligence, you can clearly see which is what he wants and which isn't. Now I'll tell you what he's doing. It's called an open scheme. He did all these things and put them in front of us. Whether we believe it or not, there's only one result: to kill him or not to kill him. As for what you think, it doesn't matter at all. As long as we still want to know the situation with the demons, we have to accompany him until the end of this farce. Do you understand?" However, Ji Tongzi didn't seem to understand. But it didn't stop him from continuing to be angry. Good. Even if what you said is reasonable, how do you know that he will really tell us about the demons? Gold Photon seemed to be too lazy to talk to him anymore. She flicked her sleeves and snorted coldly. "You can ask the two saints about this." Originally she had only asked Ji Tongzi to go to the distant Black Tower to find someone, but so many things had happened. However, this was Gold Photon's own fault. How could she not have other ways to report the situation here? When she was in the tower, she sensed the surging of demonic power here, so she knew that a great demon had come. Although there were many high-level cultivators in the tower, they were all busy with a matter that would greatly affect the battle this time. Only she had just received an order from the two saints, so she still had some free time. If they were facing an ordinary demon, one that didn't have a passage technique, she could also use some mystical power and inform the tower of the situation here. However, since she knew that Li Yunxin wasn't here to fight to his death, but to seek peace, she knew that he wouldn't dare to kill her. He didn't dare to kill her, so no matter how angry she was, she didn't have any thoughts of fighting to her death, and only wanted to fight for a breath. At the border of Yi country, she had lost inexplicably and miserably. She only wanted to torture him now, kill his spirit, and then beat him at his own game according to the two saints. Because of this, how could she ask for help in front of Li Yunxin? This detestable demon passage technique was seen by him. Wouldn't she be at a disadvantage for no reason? She might as well ask the three cultivators to escape and just think that they were afraid. Just because of this thought, so many things had happened. If this kind of extreme thought was placed on an ordinary cultivator of the celestial sect, it would be a terrifying inner demon and obsession. If it was placed on an ordinary mortal, they would also be laughed at for being stuck in a dead end. However, this golden light was originally a wandering soul that was attached to a human body. She had the stubbornness of a ghost cultivator, and she also had the emotions of a mortal. At this moment the two were mixed together, making her even more anxious and resentful. Anger rose in her heart for no reason. This detestable Li Yunxin. Now that he had appeared, he had caused her to be filled with anger again. Seeing that she was really angry, the other two cultivators finally persuaded Ji Tongzi with kind words. Ji Tongzi, who was at the peak of the transcendent stage, also knew that the golden light was not easy to deal with, so he snorted angrily, rode on lightning and fled in the direction of the Black Tower. The two of them had argued for so long in the divine sense, but in the real world it was only a moment. At the moment when the three cultivators of Celestial Sect flew away, a dazzling light suddenly burst out from the dragon in the clouds, and an unstoppable force violently spread in all directions like rolling waves. With the strong faith of more and more ordinary soldiers, and the surging power of wishes along the Wei River, he advanced into the level of a perfected master. Chapter 417. For a moment the weather changes and the earth shakes. The demonic power gathered on the dragon's outer armor, turning the originally dark black scales into a dark gold color, like an obscure ray of sunlight in the dark night. Then it seeps into his muscles, bones and flesh, making his body tougher and his spiritual mind clearer. Some indescribable feelings begin to gather in his mind. It seems that although he saw the world clearly before, it was always separated by a piece of clear glass. But now that the piece of glass had disappeared, he could directly touch something. There are 5 realms for cultivators: Xuanzhen void turning. When a cultivator reaches the real state, he can be called an immortal. After death, his spiritual mind is extremely difficult to be destroyed, so he is called immortal. But this is not the only benefit of the improvement of the realm. Kun Wuzi, who reached the Xuanzhen realm, overturned Dongting with a wave of his hand. He didn't rely on brute force. The supernatural power of the Xuanzhen realm is more subtle than that of the previous 4 realms. It doesn't reflect the specific skill, but law. According to Li Yunxin's understanding, this law is more like some kind of rule. The supernatural power of the Xuanzhen realm is the interpretation and application of the rule. Compared with the real state, it is a qualitative leap. He has now reached the Xuanzhen realm from the enlightened immortal realm. He is still far away from the peak of the real state, the perfect harmony immortal realm, let alone the Xuanzhen realm. But even then, at the instant he broke through this realm, at the instant the glass disappeared, he suddenly had some sort of subtle comprehension in his heart. In the past, the law was like the scenery outside the window. He could see it, but he couldn't touch it. Now the barrier between him and the scenery is gone. He finally gets in touch with those things. Although he doesn't know what they are and how to use them, at least he has taken the first step. Above the real state, every realm is indeed a whole new world. Therefore he can understand why demons never try it, even though they know the power of the Taoist method of pair cultivation may be greater. Li Yunxin is a genius, and he has been taught by his parents since he was a child. He is not inferior to those Taoists on Mount Yunshan. But even so, it is extremely difficult for him to improve his realm by relying on his own cultivation, passing the test and abandoning desires. In fact, he was in the transcendent state when he left the mountain, and his cultivation was far below that of the 9th young master. Now he was a perfected master, a terrifying great demon. During this period of time, not a single step had been cultivated by himself. It was all thanks to the fiendish demon's methods of taking over and absorbing the power of wishes that his cultivation realm improved by leaps and bounds. Only after he had advanced to a higher realm and encountered a situation where he needed to use some Dao skills and supernatural powers, would he carefully pick 1 or 2 from the translucent jade slip and learn them for emergencies. Every time Lu Laodao saw him learn a spell or divine ability in less than a quarter of an hour, he would be amazed. However, Li Yunxin himself knew that he was only doing this to save the situation. He was lazy by nature. However, when it came to his own life, he was not a lazy person. Although they often risked their lives, taking risks and being unprepared were not the same thing. If he could, the illuminating jade slip contained all the ultimate knowledge left behind by the art saint. Why didn't he learn all of it? Because it was impossible to learn. The cultivation system of the Xianmen had existed for tens of thousands of years. The art saint's painting Dao was tailor-made for her by the Deva. It was extremely difficult to find any shortcuts or loopholes for something like this. The cultivators of the past were probably fools who did not understand the ways of the world. However, there were so many fools who focused on studying Dao skills. How could there be any shortcuts for him to take? When it came to the cultivation of supernatural powers, one had to take one step at a time and cultivate diligently. Only then would one be able to master many things thoroughly. The path of cultivation was the same for a 100-meter-tall building from the ground. However, he had used the heretical methods of the fiendish demon to make his cultivation realm improve by leaps and bounds, which had buried many hidden dangers. Someone had mentioned this to him before. This hidden danger was not about love or desire. It was about his mastery of spells and supernatural powers. There were many supernatural powers that could be used in every realm, and there were many subtle connections between each supernatural power and Dharma access. He did not have a solid foundation when he was in the transcendent state, and when he reached the true state, it was even more unstable. That was why in Lu Laodao's eyes he only learned one or two things at a time. Furthermore, he had to go through a lot of trouble to find a spell that he could understand and that did not involve too many other spells. Otherwise, if he really had the body of a true state demon and the solid cultivation base of a true state cultivator, how terrifying would he be? But even so, Li Yunxin was slightly shocked at this moment. Qi Wen's dragon body had turned into a dark gold color. The pair of bright red antlers on top of his head had also turned into a light gold color. The gold was so bright that it was hard to tell if it was light or substance. The giant dragon hovered up and down in the clouds. It only took 3 breaths' time to complete the advancement. At this moment, the 3 cultivators of Ji Tongzi rode on lightning, and tried to escape to the tall tower where cultivators gathered in the sky. The giant dragon roared fiercely and the scales on its body opened and closed. Countless electric snakes instantly gathered into a thick bolt of lightning, and blasted onto the 3 cultivators. If mortals were hit by this attack, they would have been turned into ashes. But the 3 cultivators of the transcendent state had strong physical bodies. They were just blasted off the clouds and fell to the ground. No one knew if they were dead or alive. Li Yunxin made a hoarse voice that sounded like metal rubbing against stone in the clouds. Want to leave? Since you are here, can you still leave? There are so many lives on the ground, who are you going to find? The 3 immortals in the sky created lightning, which was a shocking thing to watch. But in the blink of an eye, they were blasted down from the sky by the Dragon King. The mortals on the ground immediately cheered and even forgot their fear. Of course, no one thought about every debt has a debtor. When many people are brought together by the same great and powerful emotion, the individual thoughts of men become insignificant. The strong collective consciousness made it difficult for them to think. They could only go with the flow of the grand will, and become an insignificant but important part of the whole. When Li Yunxin blasted the 3 cultivators, he immediately felt the power of wish increase. But he was now a perfected master. The amount of demon power that could be contained in the ocean of Qi and mountain of snow was more than 10 times less than that of a perfected master. Therefore, the power of wish could only be used to nourish and consolidate the realm. But even so, it was still a terrible power that ordinary cultivators could not imagine. They often needed to use a few years to nourish their realm, but for demons, it might only take a few days. The situation was getting out of control. Gold Photon sneered coldly, Li Yunxin. I said before that you are seeking death, but I didn't mean that I am going to kill you here today. Instead, I'm asking you, don't you know why you're here? The fierce voices of the people on the ground were just background to her. She didn't kill before because she didn't want the situation to develop to the worst state. But now, seeing Li Yunxin's arrogant appearance and aggressive momentum, the hatred in her heart became more and more intense. That day at the border of Qingye, Li Yunxin was besieged by her and was almost defeated like a stray dog. But he luckily escaped with his life and now he was full of vigor again. This damn demon. She was really annoyed. Who cares about the tens of thousands of people? Anyway, a thought suddenly jumped out of her mind. Because of this thought, Gold Photon suddenly narrowed her eyes. The anger and resentment in her heart seemed to be frozen in an instant. They didn't dissipate but only became harder and colder. Just now, in front of so many people, you called the Freemasonry. Gold Photon stared at Li Yunxin. Now let me guess why you are here. You already know what this Xianmen looks like, don't you? Li Yunxin sneered in the clouds. A group of wandering souls of the Freemasonry, possessing the bodies of Xianmen cultivators, turning the good Daotong Kenzo into a nest of demons and monsters. Do you think I know what Xianmen looks like now? Gold Photon laughed. Exactly. Li Yunxin, since you know so many things, you should also know. Today we are already impatient with those stupid Taoist priests. This time Xianmen came out in full force to fight against the demons. You should also know not to win but to kill these Taoist priests. Now you come to this Xianmen again, nothing more than to be a broker. It's just that the broker in the world wants money and benefits. You, the broker, want life. Gold Photon looked at him coldly as if she had already seen through his thoughts. You want the demons to lose and also want Xianmen to lose. You want both sides to suffer, right? Hearing her words, the clouds and lightning around Li Yunxin seemed to suddenly recede a little. The huge dragon body circled in the clouds. The murderous intent and hostility seemed to have weakened a little. You idiot, last time you were almost killed by me. Now you dare to guess my thoughts? Seeing his reaction, Jin Guangzi seemed to be even more certain in his heart. She knew that when Li Yunxin came here, she faintly felt that something was wrong. When she came here and saw Li Yunxin's arrogant appearance, that feeling became stronger. Now, she felt that she was finally going to find the truth. So she ignored Li Yunxin's mockery. Even because she heard this mockery, her heart became more secure. This meant that she had touched the thing that the demon was afraid of being seen through. Haven't you revealed enough of your thoughts? You can deceive those idiots, but you can't deceive me. Her cold smile returned to her lips, just like when she commanded several sects of cultivators to besiege Li Yunxin. Everyone says that you're a schemer. Listening to what you've done before, it seems that you're indeed a little clever. But these days I've been thinking, why didn't I see anything special about you? At that time in Changji town, you showed your real body and killed to your heart's content. But do you know why I only watched you kill but didn't make a move? Gold Photon smiled. Because I thought that you were a smart person and thought, a smart person like you wouldn't rely on brute force to save your life. But who knew? Knowing that you were about to die, you didn't use any tricks. Now that I think about it, the one who finally took away my glazed sword heart, was it the mortal on the ground that I ignored? Li Yunxin suddenly became furious. His huge eyes shot out brilliant golden light. Who has the patience to listen to your stupid words? Come and die. This terrifying giant beast was about to pounce. But at this moment Gold Photon shouted, you already had a way out, so you want to die, right? This shout seemed to have a strange magic power, and it froze Qi Wen's real body. Not only was her body frozen, but even the rolling thunder in the sky paused slightly. Suddenly, large clouds of water vapor suddenly gushed out from the gap of the giant dragon's armor, covering the entire sky and blocking the eyes and ears of the believers on the ground. What did you say? Who told you this bullshit? Qi Wen growled in a low voice. The smile on Gold Photon's face grew wider. She raised her hand and pointed at Li Yunxin. I just thought about it. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for acting too much. When you were in the Qin Kingdom and the Yi Kingdom, you put yourself in danger. Then you went to the Manwan Mountain and caused a lot of trouble. Today, you came to the camp of the Xianmen sect alone. If all the cultivators in our sect came out, they wouldn't ask you why, they would just kill you first. Do you have any chance to confuse people with sweet words? You took a risk this time and I think you have the nature of a demon. But now, you want to die again and again. Everything you have done these days, if you think about it carefully, there is no strategy to speak of. Gold Photon laughed coldly. I don't believe you are that stupid. Then, there is only one reason to explain it. You have nothing to fear and you already have a way out. When you were in the city of Wei, you already died once. But you became a demon again. It is said that at that time, you made Dragon Juqiwen and that stupid Lu Ling think that you were at your wits' end and only wanted to die. And now you are trying the same trick. The Golden Photon suddenly stopped smiling. You want to die in this battle under the watch of the demons and the celestial sect, and then be resurrected with your secret method. And hide, don't you? You are living hard under the conflict of the demons, the Xianmen sect and my sect, and you want to find a chance to rest and recover, right? In the sky, the sound of thunder suddenly stopped. Not only did the sound of thunder disappear, even the huge body of the dragon also disappeared. Among the layers of thick clouds, Li Yunxin showed his demon incarnation. However, his current incarnation looked radiant and resplendent. Dark gold scales, sharp thorns grew out of the tip of each armor leaf, like a small golden sword. The two horns on his head flickered with light as if formed by many light blades. His snow-white and long mane danced in the cold wind behind him. Li Yunxin's voice suddenly became extremely calm and cold. Since you are so smart. He was silent for a long time, then took a deep breath. I can't let you live. This time you want to die. Chapter 418. His cold words seemed to be within Jin Guangxi's expectations. So the female sect master of the 5 elemental sword sect laughed. Sure enough. But Li Yunxin, you still have another way to go. I've already met the 2 sages before I came here. I'm sure you already know that the 2 sages are now our people. Before I left, the 2 sages said to me. She paused for a moment and a layer of colorful light gradually appeared on her body, shining like the morning glow. Li Yunxin is also a rare smart person among the people in the lower realm. If I were to see you today, I would be willing to let bygones be bygones. Then she paused and looked coldly at Long Sun, whose aura was becoming more and more violent and fierce. But looking at you now, I think you've made up your mind not to be tied up obediently. After saying this, she turned her right hand. A ball of golden light suddenly appeared in her palm. Inside the ball of light, countless small golden swords were flying. If it wasn't the glazed sword heart, what else could it be? Li Yunxin threw this thing to Kong Tongzi and told him to take it back, conveying the intention of asking for peace. Today this thing had returned to Jin Guangxi's hands. Then I'll fight you fair and square. Last time the person beside you used a trick to take away my glazed sword heart. I told the 2 sages about it and they said that the mortal might be the reincarnation of a certain sage. What a coincidence. We've been looking for that so-called reincarnation sage. Then the one beside you is the reincarnation of a sword sage, isn't she? The layer of colorful light on Jin Guangxi's body should be some kind of powerful magic treasure for protection. She activated this treasure and revealed the glazed sword heart in her palm. It seemed that she had come prepared. Li Yunxin casually grabbed at the void. The cloud and lightning were caught in his palm. These 2 seemingly invisible things began to linger around him, as if a bright battle robe had appeared on his body out of nowhere. Thunder Cloud Protection was a demonic magical ability that he had comprehended after advancing to the next realm. Now that it was draped over his body, it looked even more tyrannical than the protective magic treasure of the golden light. Thereupon he said in a cold voice, "You are right. All the dangerous things I've been doing these days are for the sake of escaping through death." He guessed correctly. He is indeed the reincarnation of a sword saint. But you don't have to worry about the sword saint being present today. Even if he reincarnates, he'll just be a useless person with no magical powers. But you humph. Last time he had to rely on his magic treasure to stand on top of the cloud and use his methods cowardly. What new stuff did he come up with this time? When you talk about being upright, you're actually doing these *T things. Gold Photon suddenly faced the sky and laughed heartily. Ha! Li Yunxin, is there any use in using this kind of method to make fun of me? I'm not afraid to tell you. I have a total of 6 Dharma treasures with me on this trip to Mt. Chuyun. It's enough to make you surrender. Her figure swayed and the 7-colored light on her body became even brighter. Even the moonlight above the clouds was attracted over, making her look even more radiant. This is called the Celestial Cloak. It was made by the 79th saint of calligraphy of Dao Tong. If you use 100% of your strength to attack me, it will return you 11% of its strength. Do you want to try it? As soon as she finished speaking, the glazed sword in her palm suddenly expanded. More than half of the ball of light immediately enveloped an area of several li around the 2 of them. Take my sword first. When they were at the border of Qing Kingdom and Yi Kingdom, she had used this glazed sword to envelop a group of people. It made it so that Li Yunxin couldn't escape, and it made it so that the cultivators couldn't escape. Now she used the same method again. It seemed that she had more confidence than before. However, her confidence seemed to be groundless. When she was in Changji town, she needed to spend a while to set up the formation. Now this glazed sword formation of hers was completed in one go without any delay. It could be seen that her skills had indeed increased greatly. After a stern shout, a group of shining swords jumped out of thin air 3 feet in front of Li Yunxin. Like a storm, they flew toward him with a hum. However, he had long been prepared. What he left in place was only an illusion. The sword of light became a long golden light. In an instant, it tore a terrifying hole in the thick clouds in the sky and crashed into the ground. The earth shook and the mountains shook. Spiritual power exploded among the people on the ground. In an instant, hundreds of people were killed or injured. And this was nothing more than the first tentative strike, the aftermath of a missed shot. In the next moment, Li Yunxin's demonic body was like a sword of golden light. He appeared out of thin air 3 feet in front of her. Lightning curled around his body. His arms grabbed at the empty air and pulled out 2 spear-like bolts of lightning. He threw them toward the golden light. Encircling yourself again? Didn't I teach you enough last time? The golden light didn't dodge. She took his attack head-on. 2 thick bolts of lightning shot out from Li Yunxin's palms and hit the sword cultivator's body. For a moment, the sky changed color. All the colors in the scenery became dazzling white. But just at this moment, a figure was sent flying like an arrow. It wasn't the golden light but Li Yunxin. He flew out 6 to 7 feet before he could stabilize his body. The lightning on his body was so strong that it almost turned into electric snakes. However, there were specks of golden light in the sky like the afterglow of the afterglow. The celestial cloak had actually blocked his desperate attack and caused him to be seriously injured. The golden light exhaled lightly. She was now high above the clouds. The colorful light on her body didn't weaken. Instead, it became more dazzling. The celestial cloak has a magical power. She smiled and turned her wrist again. The crystal light sword chased after Li Yunxin like a flock of birds. Every time you attack it, it not only returns your power but also stores your demonic power. Next time it will return it to you. This time you spit out a few drops of blood. Next time it will shatter your bones. And the third time it will probably shake your spirit out of your body. She said this calmly. It was as if she had returned to the battlefield above Xianxia town, where she had absolute control and dominance. She watched coldly as Li Yunxin was surrounded and chased. She calculated everything in her heart. If it wasn't for the sudden appearance of someone. But Li Yunxin dodged 3 times. It seemed that he had slightly adjusted his breath. Then he suddenly disappeared into the clouds and hid his figure. Then he laughed. Oh? So you can't be touched. Are you going to stand there like a clay doll and wait for the people below to worship you? The golden light wasn't annoyed. She sneered and turned her left hand again. An extremely thin mirror immediately appeared in his palm. This mirror rotated slowly in her palm. But it was so thin that every time it rotated to a certain angle, it seemed to disappear. Not even a thin line could be seen. It was not a common bronze mirror in this era. It was just a round plate as clear as autumn water. If you hide, I can't find you. The golden light stopped in her left hand and a bright light shot out from the mirror. Nothing seemed to change between heaven and earth, but, although the clouds were there was only an outline left. It seemed that the colors in the layers of thick clouds were hollowed out, leaving only transparent lines. In the clouds and mist, the figure of Li Yunxin appeared. Without any hesitation he sent out a large number of light curtains. The cloud layer was instantly blasted into pieces. This treasure is called the Tiandijian. The golden light broke 2 of Li Yunxin's tricks in a row. She felt high-spirited. Even her voice became slightly excited. It was made by the 146th master of calligrapher. Under the clear light of the treasure mirror, evil spirits have nowhere to hide. Do you know how many arrogant demons have been turned into ashes by this treasure mirror? Li Yunxin, do you surrender? I surrender to you. Li Yunxin cursed. Suddenly, 3 identical human figures appeared in the air. No one knew if she had used the magical power of soul incarnation, or if she had used the art of painting school to conjure shadows. As soon as the 3 figures appeared, they split into 3 different directions and shot towards the place where Jin Guangwen was standing. After dodging a few more light swords, a huge golden deity suddenly took shape in the void. He raised his fist that was the size of a small mountain and roared, "Fight!" Then he smashed his fist down on the golden light swords. He had seen this deity before in Xianxia town. It was the painting spirit named Wu Song, summoned by the treasure in the octagonal ancient scroll. The octagonal ancient scroll was the most precious treasure of the painting sect. One of the treasures was comparable to the immortal cloak, Tiandijian, and glazed sword heart on the golden light. But this time, the god's huge fist hit the golden light's body. But this swordsman still didn't move. However, the golden body that occupied half of the sky collapsed with a loud bang, like a clay statue that had been decaying for years and the paint on its body was peeling away. After the golden body collapsed, the doppelganger that summoned the golden body also exploded into a cloud of golden blood mist in the air. It was not an illusion summoned by the painting sect, but a real soul transformation into real body. The golden light froze for a moment and then sneered, "Good, good, good. What a demon. What a demon." The reason why she sighed was that the soul transformation into real body was rarely used by ordinary cultivators in battles. When Kun Wuzi first came to Dongting, he came with a real body transformed from the soul. When he was at Dongting, he learned that Yazi and Lord Dongting were going to take him down together, so he flew away. He cherished this doppelganger as much as he cherished his own life. That's because the real body transformed by the soul has the same origin. If the real body was killed, the deity would also be seriously injured. It was inevitable that the deity's realm would drop. Therefore, cultivators only used the real body to do some small things that the deity couldn't do. However, on the battlefield of life and death, to create such a thing was simply courting death. In order to control the magic weapon, Li Yunxin had created 3 real bodies. One of the real bodies shattered because of the backfire of the god Wu Song. This meant that his personal ability was also greatly damaged. He had just advanced to the advanced level of Zhenren and would probably fall back soon. Her guess seemed to be right. One of the doppelganger was destroyed. On the other side, another doppelganger raised its hands and shot out a golden light sword. The shape of this light sword was not regular. Looked like a small piece that broke from somewhere and was splitting into a long and thin shape. It was none other than the dragon god token that Shinryu gave to Li Yunxin that day. The scale armor from the strongest dragon in the world was so sharp and hard that ordinary treasures couldn't compare with it. It directly smashed 3 light curtains that blocked the way and stabbed the protective light of Jin Yuegua. This time, Gold Photon's entire body was actually stabbed 3 steps away. The terrifying power created ripples on the surface of the celestial cloak, which let out a sharp whistling sound. However, Jin Yuegua's face turned cold. He suddenly made a gesture. Another round of white light shone on his body. This ring of light looked very similar to the glazed sword heart from before. However, it was more like a transparent cover. It only covered the space within 10 meters around Jin Yuegua. Therefore, both the colorful glow of the cloak of the immortals and the sharp whistling when the dragon god token stabbed this treasure were all absorbed by it. Sound, light, everything seemed to become solid in this white barrier. This third treasure is called the Cloud Collector Platform. For it, demon power and spiritual power are all good things that can be collected and refined. When cultivated to a high level, even time can be collected. After taking out this treasure, Jin Yuegua seemed to have vented her anger. While saying that, she stretched out her hand and grabbed. The light and sound within a radius of 30 feet were all caught in her hands, and they looked like colorful ribbons. The dragon god token that was originally pressed against her lower abdomen also fell down and was caught in her hand. The second clone that sent out the dragon god token was immediately counterattacked by the cloak. When the treasure attacked, it even pushed Jin Yuegua back 3 steps. How could the counterattack be ordinary? There was a loud rumble in the night sky, and a large mass of thick fire rolled and spread wildly. It expanded to such an enormous size that it filled the entire area covered by the glazed sword heart. The whole space, whether it was above or below the ground, was filled with terrible heat. Even the thousands of people, livestock, houses, grass, trees, and soil on the ground, all turned into flying ashes. This surging fire lasted for a full 5 breaths of time before it was absorbed into the white cover because Jin Yuegua once again performed the magical power of the Cloud Collector Platform. At this moment, looking at Li Yunxin's real body, the clouds and lightning surrounding him were all gone, and the scales also became dark again. The pair of golden horns on his head disappeared and became blood red again. He had only entered the realm of a perfected master for a quarter of an hour, but now, because 2 of his clones were destroyed, he fell back to the realm of a perfected master. Then this is the dragon god token. Jin Yuegua pinched the token between her fingers and smiled as she spun it. Never change even in death. Now do you know that what I said is true? You attacked me 3 times and your spirit was almost shaken out of your body. Do you want to try a 4th time? Li Yunxin, do you surrender? Chapter 419. The confrontation between the two had only lasted for a dozen breaths. In such a short time, perhaps mortals had only walked a few dozen steps. However, it was also in such a short time that many things had disappeared. Originally, this was the main camp of the Qing army with many soldiers, tents, supplies and food. Now looking down, there was only a very precise circle on the ground. This circle was the cross-section between the light shield of the heart of azure glaze and the ground. Outside the cross-section, large numbers of mortals were fleeing in all directions. Even their pious faith in the Dragon King and their anger toward the Xianmen could not stop them. This was because they saw the scene inside the cross-section. There was only a pool of burning lava. When the demon clone of a Deshangzhenren exploded, the energy that was released was not something that ordinary things could resist. If there was anything left, it would be a cocoon that looked small when looking down from the sky. This cocoon was actually a light shield. The runes on it flowed with mysterious light, resisting the erosion of the lava on the ground. It was third cultivator of true virtue who had been blown off the cloud by Li Yunxin. Wei River Dragon King, who had lost 2 clones in a row, stood quietly in the sky. It seemed that he had suffered a serious injury, or perhaps he had not expected that the super powerful attack of the 2 clones with 2 powerful magic treasures would not have any effect. He stopped the momentum of the fierce attack. The scales on his body opened and closed as if he was breathing and adjusting his breath, as if he was already a little exhausted. The fierce battle just now had triggered a surge of demonic power and spiritual energy into the sky. He adjusted his breath for a while, then turned his head slightly to look into the distance. The black tower where the cultivators gathered several li away was only a thin line from such a high altitude. But now, the thin line seemed to be lit up with a light that was difficult to detect. It seemed that the cultivators in the tower had been alarmed by the movement here and were rushing over. Gold Photon also saw the movement, so he turned the Dragon God token at his fingertips and sighed. Earlier, I told the 3 of them to go back and report, but you had to stop them. Now that the people over there have been alarmed, most of the cultivators in the tower are Xianmen who will die in the Yi Kingdom, not our people. When they get here, Li Yunxin will not be as easy to talk to as I am. Let me ask you again, your heart must be very bitter, right? Li Yunxin suddenly raised his head and said. The previous explosion had already swept away the dark clouds in the sky. At this moment, the moonlight was like water and the night sky was clear. High up in the sky, there was only 1 person and 1 demon. And on Li Yunxin's face, the ruthlessness from before had completely disappeared. He had suddenly become calm. Jin Guangzi thought he misheard and frowned. What? Li Yunxin shook his body and a lot of ashes fell from the gaps between his scales. What I'm saying is, you're a wandering soul and you have emotions. You're not like those Taoist priests who have cultivated themselves into demons. Those Taoist priests disregard human life and kill people as though they are ants. I can understand that. But you... Li Yunxin frowned slightly. You also like to kill indiscriminately. When we were in Changji town, you wanted to kill the little girl beside you, Meng. And now, you want to show off your treasure to me, Li Yunxin sighed. You're so mean and so perverted. You must be very bitter in your heart. After saying this, he suddenly frowned again. What's the hurry? Jin Guangzi frowned even more because of his expression. Some kind of uneasy feeling suddenly spread from the bottom of her heart. She realized that things might be a little wrong. It shouldn't be like this, right? In the battle of more than 10 breaths, she had the upper hand. But now this Li Yunxin suddenly became calm and seemed to have a card up his sleeve. What the hell? She had suffered at Li Yunxin's hands before. Therefore, she subconsciously put the Dragon God token in her hand into her sleeve and made another spell to make the deity cloak and cloud collecting platform shine even brighter. But even so, she still felt a little uneasy. Li Yunxin was really cunning. She gradually couldn't figure out whether he was bluffing or not. Because of this kind of uneasy feeling, she suddenly lost the mood to play and tease. In the end, she had to stand calmly outside the garden and tease the beasts in the garden when they were trapped and helpless. If she slowly realized that the beasts might break free, playing would not only be boring but also frightening. So she stopped smiling. Fine. Since you don't surrender, don't blame me for not leaving you a way out. I'll destroy your body, extract your spirit and refine it into a wandering soul. At that time I'll see if you still have the appearance you have now. After saying this, she put her palms together in front of her chest and slightly crossed them, In the center of her palms, there was immediately a crackling electric light. The electric light jumped and turned, and in an instant, it gathered into a vortex the size of the mouth of a bowl. It was just that the ordinary vortex was made of water, but this one was made of electricity. In the middle of the vortex, a white light became brighter and brighter, illuminating the vast heaven and earth. It was as if there were 100,000 suns rising between Jin Guangxi's palms. She looked straight at Li Yunxin in the snow-white light, but she saw that he still didn't retreat, nor did he take out any magic weapon. Instead, a magic brush suddenly appeared in his palm. The small magic brush was like a toothpick in the hands of the tall demon god. But Li Yunxin only held it in her hand and began to write something in the void. Jin Guangxi knew that Li Yunxin practiced the painting sect, so she only glanced at it for a moment. But because of this glance she was slightly surprised. She was a wandering soul and self-proclaimed to practice both sword and Dao. So with a glance she could tell that what Li Yunxin was writing now was Daotong talisman. At the same time she also knew that his talisman writing was rusty, as if he had just learned it. Writing talismans in the air was a great test of skill. Even if Li Yunxin had practiced the painting sect before, and some of the principles were the same, he couldn't be as smooth as those cultivators who had been practicing for decades. But why was this demon writing this half-baked Daotong talisman at this time? The uneasiness in Jin Guangxi's heart grew stronger. It didn't make sense. In this kind of certain death situation, there was no reason for this Li Yunxin to be like this. Could it be that he still had some way to turn the situation around? All these thoughts flashed through his mind in a flash. And at the same time, the cultivators who flew over from several li away finally arrived. 4 high-level cultivators. The distance of several li was nothing more than a few breaths of time. They all sensed the soaring demon power and spiritual power here, so they knew that the demon coming here might be even more terrifying than expected. He dared to fight to the death with the leader of a Kenzo sect in this kind of place. These cultivators were all cultivators of Daotong and Kenzo. They often traveled the world and their attitudes towards demons were the most radical. They only wanted to rid the world of demons and evil and return peace to the world. Because of this, they became the first batch of people that Jin Guangxi wanted to eliminate. When this profound realm cultivator, 3 true realm cultivators, and nearly 100 transcendent realm cultivators arrived, they saw the dazzling mystic light in Jin Guangxi's palm. So they were slightly surprised, because this thing was actually quite famous in Daotong and Kenzo. It was originally a treasure refined by the 176th generation sword saint. The treasures refined by the sages were originally used by the sages themselves. Ordinary cultivators with slightly lower cultivation levels could not use the treasures of the sages to their full potential, and they might not be able to use the treasures as easily as ordinary treasures. This was like throwing a peerless sword to a child. If they could not even pick it up, how could they talk about other things? Because of this, although the sages of the past left behind many treasures, there were not many that could be used. Only a few true realm and profound realm cultivators could use these treasures, and they would be taken out from the dusty treasure vault and given to people who really needed them. This treasure was one of the easiest to use. It could be used by emptiness realm cultivators. But it was also the most useless one. Only 16 spells were needed to use this thing. It could be used by cultivators above the emptiness realm, and there was no need to spend too much effort on it. Perhaps there was something wrong with the method that was passed down later, but when the later generations used this thing, they found that it didn't have any power. The only advantage it had was that it could safely and steadily channel the violent and unruly spiritual power in the body, like a pipe. It was said that the immortal qi in the body of the 176th generation sword saint had entered the meridians because of some kind of cultivation method, and that was why he refined this thing for himself. After he sorted through the meridians, this thing became useless. But at this moment, these cultivators saw the treasure in Jin Guangxi's palm through the golden light shield of the glazed sword heart. It was shining and had a terrifying aura. Where did this terrifying power come from? But the glazed sword heart was still a relic of the sword saint. Even profound realm Taoists couldn't break it, so they could only stay far away and watch the two fight. Some of the sharp-eyed ones saw Li Yunxin's appearance and recognized him as the 9th son of the dragon, Li Yunxin, also known as the Wei River Dragon King. He had been dealing with the people of Daotong and Kenzo for a long time, and many people knew his appearance and temperament. Now the cultivators in the Xianmen knew what he looked like: black scales, red horns, and liked to wear white when he transformed into a human. Looking at his appearance now, how could they not know? This dragon's son is bold. He dares to come here and seek death. It looks like he is on par with the Golden Light sect leader. Someone couldn't help but sigh. High-level cultivators' hearts were as calm as water, and they wouldn't say such meaningless words. The one who said this was a transcendent realm cultivator. The Taoist heart of a transcendent realm cultivator was not stable, and they would have many worldly emotions. Therefore, when they saw the current Li Yunxin, they felt a little emotional and yearned for great power. But the true state cultivator's eyes were much sharper than theirs. He only snorted softly. Look more carefully. What's in the Golden Light sect leader's palm? What's outside of my body? The one profound realm, 3 true realms, and nearly 100 transcendent realms that came here were not from the same sect, but the Black Tower that had time to spare, and all came as reinforcements. But now that they saw such a scene, they were not in a hurry. Therefore, a true state expert raised his hand and pointed from afar. Now the great battle between the Xianmen and the demons is imminent. Many of you have been cultivating in seclusion on normal days. Occasionally you walk in the human world, and those you meet are just some small demons. A true state great demon like Dragon 9, however, is very rare. He then pointed at the distant Golden Light sect that was completely enveloped by the glaring profound light. There are countless treasures in our Xianmen, but the treasures left behind by the saints are also rare. Until now, it was the Golden Light sect leader who used the treasures on him to fight against the Dragon 9 cheese kiss. The key points within are enough for you to comprehend for decades. Today you have received such an opportunity, so you have to look carefully. In the future, when you fight with the demons, you will have a plan in mind. When they said these words, it was also when the Golden Light sect leader activated the spell, and a white light appeared in his palm. It was also when that Li Yunxin was writing the Daotong talisman with an unfamiliar technique. This kind of scene was extremely rare. It did not look like a battle between cultivators and demons, but more like 2 cultivators practicing. Therefore, someone couldn't help but frown. This demon knows our Daotong talisman? The 3 true state cultivators also frowned slightly. They knew about the painting sect, but they were secretive about it and did not mention it to the low-level disciples. It was said that before Li Yunxin became a demon, he had practiced the painting sect's method, so it was not strange that he knew how to use Dao arts. Thereupon he said, "There are evil demons and unorthodox sects who resort to trickery. What will it do? It's nothing more than being at a dead end, and using this kind of clumsy method to save the situation. But look carefully, how is his method of writing Dao talisman compared to yours?" Someone looked for a while and let out a sigh of relief. "Not as good as us." The true realm cultivator smiled. "Fiendish demons are known for their powerful bodies. But our profound gate cultivators are more intelligent than stupid demons, using Dao arts and treasures to win. Right now, sect leader Golden Light sect has a celestial cloak and a cloud harvesting platform. He also has such a spirit treasure in his hand. It looks like he is going to fight this demon's body head-on. Can also be considered teaching these evil demons a lesson, if they rely on themselves." As he said this, the profound realm cultivator standing in the air in front of him, who had not said a word, suddenly frowned and said to himself, "Huh? This talisman written by the demon." In the next moment, this profound realm cultivator suddenly fiercely hit the light barrier in front of him, but couldn't break it in a short time. Then he shouted again, "Stop!" But before he said this, the dazzling white light in Golden Light sect's palm had already reached its peak. But the trace of uneasiness in her heart still dispersed. Thus she frowned and said in a low voice, "Li Yunxin, do you know this 4th treasure of mine? It's called the Mirror of the Realm." Li Yunxin suddenly laughed and clearly said this name. This was the name of the treasure in Golden Light sect's hand. Golden Light sect was stunned. But the power in the Mirror of the Realm in his palm had already accumulated to its peak, and a violent aura wreaked havoc in the narrow space, even attracting the solidified demon power in the cloud harvesting platform, turning it into an even more blazing white light. It was at this time that she heard a fierce shout. The voice was extremely far away, as if it came from outside the golden light barrier of the glazed sword heart. "Stop!" Chapter 420. But at this moment she didn't only hear the word stop. Because she saw Li Yunxin draw a line in the air, as if he had completed a talisman. But Jean Photon couldn't see what this talisman was for. Then his body suddenly expanded and scales stood up. He revealed a fierce and ruthless grin and his mouth was full of shiny fangs. I also know that your fifth treasure is called Immortal Bone. Along with this thunderous voice, a fiend god shot out like lightning. This time, Li Yunxin's momentum was fiercer than the previous 2 times, and his speed couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. It was as if the previous 2 clones were just strolling, but now they were running for their lives. There was a series of rumbling explosions in the air. Before his voice died away, he had already rushed to the front of the golden photon. Even the tiniest crack on the golden photon's scales could be seen clearly. Jean Photon's 4th treasure, which was in her hand at the moment, was called the Mirror of the World. And her 5th treasure was also called the Bone of the Immortal. Li Yunxin was right. How did he know? The shout of the profound realm cultivator and Li Yunxin's roar simultaneously entered her ears. In this instant, in this short moment, before a mosquito could even flap its wings once, many thoughts surged into her mind at the same time. Li Yunxin's plan to escape through death was seen through. Why didn't he immediately turn around and leave? His 2 real bodies were both destroyed. Why did he do such a stupid thing? Why did he ask her if she felt bitter? Why did he become so calm? Why did he smile at her? Why did he say those words? Why did he? The meticulous and arrogant Jean Photon this time treated this enemy who had defeated her once very seriously. Thus, she focused 120% of her attention, taking in his every move and expression in a panoramic view. But at this moment, many expressions that made her feel uneasy, happy, or confused, all rushed into her mind. It was as if every subtle expression on her face meant something. It was as if she finally knew where her growing uneasiness came from. However, she couldn't catch it. She could not grasp any definite thought, any definite conclusion, to tell herself whence the uneasiness came. But something wasn't right. The shout of the profound realm cultivator had once again deepened this thought of hers, causing the uneasiness in her heart to completely transform into fear. It was also because of that shout and Li Yunxin's ferocious performance. There was no other thought in Jin Guangxi's mind. There was only one thing left: kill him. All the problems would be solved, right? Thus the final hand seal was formed. The mirror of the world in his palms, which was so bright that it seemed to take away all the light in the world, immediately shot out a terrifying power. A terrible explosion occurred. It occurred in this space that was enveloped by the mystic light of the glazed sword heart. Energy shot out from the bright spot on the mirror of the Yukio in Jean Photon's hand. In the blink of an eye, it filled the entire spherical barrier. Previously, when Li Yunxin's incarnation exploded, there was a similar scene. But at that time at least there were flames, smoke and flying debris. But this time, there were only colorful dragons of fire and lightning entangled with each other, rolling, expanding and destroying crazily in every inch of space. This terrible scene happened in an instant. The fire and lightning came head-on, but were trapped inside the glazed barrier. Even so, many of the cultivators in the transcendent state could not help but tilt their heads back, as if a strong wind was blowing against them. Before the terrible explosion occurred, the profound realm cultivator shouted, "Stop." It was extremely difficult for such an expert to lose his composure like this. Therefore, the surprise in the hearts of the cultivators was far greater than the surprise caused by the terrible explosion. But at this moment the profound realm cultivator did not say a word again. The light barrier created by the glazed sword heart covered an area with a radius of 1 mile. Now it was filled with violent turbulence of energy and it was even more dazzling than the sun. Compared to this huge light ball, the group of over 100 cultivators was just a small black dot. The entire camp of the Allied army and even the area several miles away was illuminated by this light, as if it were daytime. What a terrible power! This is the power of dozens of perfected Taoist masters. The profound realm cultivator silently faced the raging waves of fire that were less than 3 inches away from him, and let out a deep sigh. The glazed sword heart was a relic left by the sword saint. The golden light of the true realm cultivator was intertwined with this treasure, so the power of this mystic light barrier alone was not far from that of the sages in the past, and he could not easily break it. Hearing his sigh, the true realm cultivator hesitated for a while and then asked cautiously, "Sect leader, why did you shout just now? Did something go wrong?" His question was also what the nearly 100 cultivators behind him wanted to ask. In fact, with this profound realm cultivator here, these people were not very worried about any demons or devils. This profound realm cultivator was in the profound realm of Xi, and his Taoist name was Dry Cicada. He used to be the head of the Pinglai Paradise, one of the 18 paradises of Daotong. But later the head of the Langya Paradise, Kuan Wuzi, was killed and he succeeded as the head of the Langya Paradise. Everyone who followed such an expert to this place actually had the intention of learning and observing. That ignorant demon had come here to behave atrociously so they could use it to train their troops. But now, unexpectedly, this sect leader Dry Cicada had lost his composure. Hearing the true realm cultivator's question, Dry Cicada remained silent for a while. The fiery clouds inside the glazed light barrier had not yet dispersed, and they seemed to be burning even more fiercely. After 2 breaths of time, Dry Cicada sighed again, pointed at the inside of the light barrier, and said without turning his head, "Let me ask you. Do you know what's the deal with the immortal cloak, the heaven and earth mirror, the cloud harvesting platform, and the world mirror that our sect leader is wearing?" He was asking you. Therefore everyone knew that there was a need to consider it. Therefore, they were relieved. The fact that a profound realm cultivator could consider them in this terrible battlefield showed that everything was still under his control. Of course, the true realm cultivator would not answer this question. Therefore, a transcendent realm cultivator thought for a while and said, "Sect leader. According to what I have learned from my daily cultivation, when these 4 treasures are placed side by side, they can form a Tao artifact." Dry Cicada did not speak and only looked at the fiery clouds close at hand. But the true realm cultivator behind him knew what he was thinking and said, "Sect leader's original intention was for you to complement each other's weaknesses and strengths. Since you have said it, tell us the whole story. If there are any brothers who have neglected something, you can check and fill in the gaps. Let me ask you again on behalf of sect leader, what is a Tao artifact?" The Taoist priest in the transcendent realm seemed to know some of the mysteries of the profound gate. Therefore when he heard this question he smiled slightly. He was not afraid of the fiery clouds that seemed to pierce through the sky and the earth, not far away. Allow me to explain in detail. The cultivators in the profound gate pay attention to refining the body and the spirit in order to ascend to heaven. However, the path of cultivation is long and dangerous, and there are evil spirits roaming the world, so there will always be fights. Since there is a fight, there must be a way to fight. The Deva passed down the Tao and the senior masters forged the treasures. For us cultivators, the body is a precious cauldron and it is very precious. Even if we are strong, we can't be like the stupid demons and use the body as a weapon. Therefore the treasures are our weapons. However, human power is sometimes limited. There is always a limit to a person's power. There is also a limit to the power of a treasure. However, if we use a strange method to combine several treasures and let them perform their respective duties, we can unleash the power of a treasure that is several times stronger than a single treasure. When the cultivator in the transcendent realm said this, only a dozen breaths had passed. But the ground was already in chaos. How could a mortal see such a scene? Moreover, it suddenly appeared in the camp at night. For a moment, on the ground that was as bright as day, tens of thousands of soldiers were in a mess. Looking down from the sky, they looked like ants whose nest was dug out. They were running and trampling, there were countless casualties and they were about to collapse. However, the hundreds of cultivators in the sky did not even look at the mortals who were like ants on the ground, who were originally here to transport the red soil for them. The Taoist priest in the transcendent realm continued. For example, the 4 treasures on the golden light sect leader. I am bold enough to deduce the thought process of the battle with the demon just now. I think it should be like this. The celestial cloak is used for protection to lure the enemy. To lure the demon to attack with full force, the more vicious the better. On the way here, Headmaster Kuchanzi said that he was investigating the demon's demonic power, and it seems that he is already at the level of an adept master. Just now he also said that the power inside the shield is equivalent to the full force attack of dozens of adept masters. It seems that the stupid demon took the bait and used all his strength together with the golden light sect leader. The demon used 10 parts of his strength, so the celestial cloak was returned to him 11 parts. Meanwhile, the dissipating spiritual power and demonic power were absorbed by the magic treasure, the Cloud Harvester. The Celestial Cloak and the Cloud Harvester, these two treasures together can protect the Golden Light Sect leader like an iron bastion, just like now. The Taoist priest took another look at the giant fireball. The light was still dazzling. Did not look like a fireball anymore. Instead, it looked more like an alchemy cauldron that was casually tossed onto the ground by a celestial being. It strengthened the terrifying power that originally belonged to the demon, and turned it into a terrifying true fire, intending to burn the demon's strong body into ashes. This is defense. The Taoist priest exhaled lightly. There is also offense. Attack with the Wuxia mirror. The Wuxia mirror can return all the powerful power within the Cloud Harvester to the demon. No matter how strong his body is, he will not be able to last long in a cauldron like this. I think the Golden Light Sect leader is being protected firmly by the Celestial Cloak and the Cloud Harvester, and is using the Wuxia mirror to pursue and attack the demon. The demon will definitely not be able to escape. The Tiandi mirror can illuminate heaven and earth, and in such a small area, there is nowhere for him to hide. These four treasures have both offense and defense, and their coordination is smooth and perfect. They can almost be said to be made by nature. Therefore, this type is called a Dao artifact. Now that the Golden Light Sect leader is using this Dao artifact to deal with the demon, it is somewhat like using a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. He finished saying these words calmly. Some cultivators looked emotional, while others looked as if they had understood something, as if they had really heard something that they did not understand before. Moreover, there seemed to be quite a number of people like this. The True Realm cultivator nodded. You're right. This Dao artifact Dao was something that the current saint had comprehended 1,000 years ago. In the tens of thousands of years of history of the Taoist sects, it is considered a novel thing. Alas, I can only sigh that there are not many treasures that we can use among the saints' relics. Until now, in nearly 1,000 years, there are only 3 so-called Dao artifacts. After sighing with emotion, he looked at Ku Chanzi again. Headmaster. After a while, Ku Chanzi sighed. Therefore, I asked her to stop, just now. He shook his head and finally turned around. Our great battle with the demon is imminent. The saint bestowed this Dao artifact to the Golden Light Sect. It should be the saint's intention, so I can't say anything else. But no. Ku Chanzi frowned slightly. The Golden Light Sect leader seems to have enmity with this Long Jiao. Now that he has encountered it, the hatred in his heart has deepened. He actually used this glazed sword heart to trap the two of them, and then used this Dao artifact to refine the demon Liunshin alive in the formation. But I saw that the demon wrote a talisman just now. Although what he wrote was unfamiliar, it looked like it was a spell related to another treasure of my Daotong. Ku Chanzi frowned. A demon named Dragons actually obtained the spell of a saint's relic. This is no small matter, so I asked the Golden Light Sect leader to stop and let that demon live so that I can carefully interrogate him. But who knew? Alas. Sect leader, you don't have to worry about this, the True Realm cultivator said in a low voice. After all, that Long Jiao is a dragon with a strong body. He has already refined him for a while. Although he can't hold on any longer, he won't die immediately. If the Golden Light Sect leader really has a great enmity with him and has a tribulation in his heart, I think he won't die so easily. Leaving a broken body, sect leader can borrow it for interrogation first, and then return it to the Golden Light Sect leader. She accidentally refined that Liunshin to death. We can also capture his soul and interrogate him. There's no need to be in such a hurry. Ku Chanzi shook his head slightly. Even so, alas. In fact, there were still some words that he didn't say. Even if he was the sect leader of the Langya Cave and a profound realm cultivator, there were some words that he couldn't say to these disciples. That Golden Light Sect seemed a little strange. Seemed to be hiding something. If what he was worried about was true, maybe she wouldn't leave a living mouth, or a soul that can be interrogated. This stupid demon. What on earth did it want to do in this place? Could it be that it really came to die? Ku Chanzi sighed again. By this time, the terrifying thunder fire in the glazed light shield had been refined for the time it took for half an incense stick to burn. Ku Chanzi sighed and planned to turn around and use his divine sense to explore the situation inside. Although Golden Light Sect's cultivation wasn't as good as his, he was still a sect leader. Now that they were fighting with the demon, it was a taboo for him to use his divine sense to explore. However, now that things had come to this, he couldn't care so much about the incantation that the demon had gotten from somewhere. But at this moment, he suddenly found that the cultivators in front of him who had been listening respectfully to his teachings. His eyes widened abruptly as he stared fixedly at the person behind him. Ku Chanzi's heart skipped a beat. Did she refine that demon to death? It was Golden Light Sect. He frowned and also turned around. He saw a figure propping its hands on the glazed light shield of the Sword Heart, like a drowning person knocking on a fish tank and trying to rush out. Then it was pulled back by someone or something in the surging fire. That figure was Golden Light Sect leader. Her face was full of extreme fear and pain. Chapter 421. Therefore these cultivators were all stunned. After 2 breaths, a Taoist priest said, "Is that the head of the Golden Light Sect?" Of course, they recognized the Golden Light, but they were not sure about the figure that appeared in the flame just now. That was to say, if a person's skin was burnt, his hair was burnt, his nose was left with 2 black holes, his lips were gone, leaving only 2 rows of blackened teeth, and his 2 eyeballs were also burst open. It was hard to tell whether that person was someone or not. However, since she appeared in this light shield and the tattered clothes she wore did belong to the head of the Kenzo Wujin sword sect, then it should be her, right? How could it be like this? Where are her immortal cloak and cloud-collecting platform? After the Taoist priest said this, another person said in a low voice, "Did you see what was behind her just now?" The flame inside the light shield was like the thickest fog in the early morning of autumn. When the golden light rushed out of the flame, it caused the flame to roll as if someone suddenly rushed out of the fog. But in fact, she only appeared for a very short time. Because she was immediately pulled back. Those with good eyesight saw the thing that pulled her back. It was a claw with dark golden scales and sharp claws on its fingertips. That was not a human's hand, but a demon's hand, the hand of Long Sun. "Open it." Ku Chanzi didn't sigh like them. Instead, he hit the light shield of the glazed sword heart with his palm. In an instant, the light shield flickered as if there were countless colors flowing around it. Suddenly, the light shield was blasted 3 meters away. However, it was still not broken. To Ku Chanzi, the size of this light shield was like that of a rubber ball to an ant. But such a huge thing was pushed more than 3 meters away by his palm, which showed how terrible the power of a mysterious realm Taoist was. After the first attack failed, Ku Chanzi made another one. His palm was very slow, as if he was beating an old man who was strengthening his body in his leisure time. However, the power of this slow palm was more powerful. As soon as they touched the light shield, a violent hurricane was created. The 3 true realm cultivators were still standing, but the hundreds of transcendent realm cultivators behind them were blown away and almost fell from the sky. The second palm struck out another 10 feet. But it still didn't break. At this time, Ku Chanzi finally let out a cry of surprise. He had seen Jin Guoguo's glazed sword heart, a golden halo with 36 small swords swimming in it. The golden light had refined the sword saint's relic with its own life force. It could almost be said that the two had fused into one. The outer layer of light was refined into her muscles, bones, skin, and flesh, strengthening her body. The 36 light swords inside were refined into the snow mountain and ocean of qi to enhance her spiritual power cultivation. When she fought with others, she would first summon this light barrier to envelop both sides. It was as if the enemy was fighting inside her body. 36 golden swords appeared and disappeared unpredictably. They were extremely powerful. A saint's treasure is meant to be used by a saint. If a cultivator below the Grand Supreme Realm didn't have enough cultivation, the power of their treasures would be greatly reduced. Jin Guogui used her own life force to refine it, which was equivalent to sacrificing her own life force. Even a profound realm cultivator couldn't match its power. However, since Jin Guoguo was at a disadvantage, why didn't she open the light barrier and ask them to go in and help her? This was the question on all the cultivators' minds except for him. They all knew that the glazed sword heart was Jin Guoguo's natal treasure. Therefore, when they saw Ku Chanzi suddenly attack the light barrier, they were all stunned. After Ku Chanzi attacked for the second time, the true realm cultivator said, "Master? Why did you do that?" Ku Chanzi stopped temporarily and frowned. He seemed to be talking to himself or explaining to the others, "Something's wrong. A demon. Just now I found out that the last talisman was a spell of the Immortal's Bone. You should know about the Immortal's Bone. Sect Master Jin Guoguo's glazed sword heart. Wasn't it sent back the day before yesterday? The Transcendent Realm cultivators didn't quite understand Ku Chanzi's words, but the three True Realm cultivators were stunned at the same time and seemed to have understood. They all knew about the Immortal's Bone. In fact, every cultivator who entered the True Realm would receive a treasure book, Records of Universal Spiritual Treasures, compiled by the Zhou Xian Lingbao School of Dao Tong. The name of this book described all kinds of treasures in this world. The treasures left by the sages of Dao Tong and Kenzo were also included in it. The three of them knew that Sect Master Jin Guoguo was defeated and severely injured in Changji Town. They also knew that her cultivation base was almost completely crippled because her natal treasure was taken away. However, they also knew that Jin Guoguo was summoned to Mount Shaoyun by the two sages a few days ago and was given a Dao item: the deity cloak, the cloud collecting platform, the Tiandi mirror, and the world mirror. Now that they heard Ku Chanzi say that Jin Guoguo's natal treasure, the glazed sword heart, was sent back the day before yesterday, they realized Jin Guoguo's cultivation base was almost crippled when she was summoned to Mount Shaoyun. How did she recover from her serious injuries and become able to use this Dao item? When Ku Chanzi mentioned the Immortal's Bone, they immediately understood. The Immortal's Bone, as the name suggested, had the miraculous effect of remolding one's body and remolding one's realm. However, this treasure had one drawback. Once it was refined into one's body, it would be extremely difficult for one's cultivation base to improve. It would be impossible for one to reach the Grand Supreme Realm. What high-level cultivators wanted was nothing more than longevity. Very few people were willing to deal with this treasure. Then Jin Guoguo must have received the Immortal's Bone and recovered her realm before she could use the Dao item. Then the day before yesterday she obtained the glazed sword heart and refined this treasure again. Before Jin Guoguo made her final attack, Ku Chanzi saw Li Yunxin write a talisman in the air. It was the Immortal's Bone technique. Let's not talk about how he came to know about this technique for now. Could it be that he knew another way to make the Immortal's Bone in Jin Guoguo's body lose its effect? Then Jin Guoguo would naturally be unable to use the Immortal Cloak in the cloud collecting platform. That was why she ended up in such a sorry and terrible state just now. However, her treasure was broken and she was at a disadvantage. Why didn't she disperse the glazed sword heart's shield and ask for help? Ku Chanzi had heard of Li Yunxin's reputation before. Although he didn't take Jin Guoguo seriously with his profound realm cultivation base, he knew that for Jin Guoguo, this demon was still difficult to deal with. It was also because he knew about Jin Guoguo's past that when he saw the horrifying golden light in the fire screen, he immediately thought of this and tried to break the light shield to rescue her. However, after failing to break the shield with 2 palm strikes in a row, another idea suddenly came to his mind. From Jin Guoguo's appearance to Ku Chanzi's 2 palm strikes, the 3 True Realm cultivators also understood this matter in a very short time. When the 3 True Realm cultivators thought of this, their first thought was exactly the same as Ku Chanzi's: break the shield and rescue her quickly. Therefore, without saying a word, they brazenly launched a palm strike. But right at this moment, Ku Chanzi suddenly shouted again, "Stop!" This was the second time he said the same thing in less than a quarter of an hour. However, this time, it was also too late. Xianxia's fierce palm strike had already landed on the light shield. Although it didn't go more than 10 feet away like Ku Chanzi's attack, it made the light shield fluctuate and shake for a while. Xianxia didn't understand what Ku Chanzi meant. He frowned slightly and was about to ask, but all of a sudden in front of them, the fiery cloud inside the shield rolled again, and revealed the golden light again. Seeing this golden light again, everyone was stunned. They were even more surprised than when they first saw her. Because when they first saw her, her face was horrible and ferocious, as if she was about to be burned alive. But this golden light in front of them, although her face was pale, her hair was slightly messy, and there were traces of blood on the corners of her mouth, her clothes were intact, and they could even see 2 extremely weak layers of mysterious light protecting her. They were the Immortal Cloak and the cloud collecting platform. Before the cultivators could say anything, the golden light had already shouted, "Why did you harm me?" Before his voice faded away, the fiery cloud was parted once again. Dragon Sun Chongwen, with his dark golden fiend god body, pounced over and struck the golden light from the back with an incomparably fierce and powerful strike. At that time, the golden light was questioning the cultivator outside the light shield and was distracted by this attack. She opened her mouth and blood gushed out of it. Just as she was about to speak, Li Yunxin's palms arrived once again. The golden light could only turn around and flee, forced to retreat by this demon. Li Yunxin's momentum didn't decrease, and his palms slammed on the light shield with a loud bang. Then he turned around and chased after the golden light shield. As soon as Li Yunxin left, the fire cloud was parted once again. Everyone saw a big ghost with a golden light and a ferocious face flash in the fire. Before he could figure out where this ghost had come from, another one emerged from the fire and followed the previous one's path. Then came the third, the fourth, and the fifth. They left very fast and had different appearances. There were 36 of them, as if all the soldiers under Li Yunxin's command were following him. The cultivators were stunned again. These big ghosts could come and go freely in such a fire cloud, which showed that their cultivation was extremely high, and they were also ghost kings in the true realm. 36 ghost kings appeared here. How could they not know about it? They had never heard of it. There were so many ghost kings in the true realm in the world. However, before Li Yunxin turned around, he did one more thing. He smiled wickedly at the cultivators outside the light shield, moved his lips and seemed to say something. When Li Yunxin, who was covered in smoke and whose armor had turned red because of the fire, disappeared again in the surging fire, and the big ghost also disappeared in the fire, the cultivators realized that according to his lips he should have said, "Thank you." But no one wanted to say these words out loud. After a full 3 breaths, Ku Chanzi slowly spat out a few words. "What a good demon! How dare you plot against me?" Chapter 422. Just a quarter of an hour ago, after Jin Guangwen had finally activated the Yukio mirror, she did indeed have the intention that Ku Chanzi had mentioned to the cultivators. She wanted to refine Li Yunxin to death in this glazed golden light shield. She naturally hated this demon for seriously injuring her earlier. She also hated his unruly appearance and how he still didn't take her seriously. However, the most important thing was what the 2 sages had told her in Little Cloud Mountain. In fact, what the 2 sages had told her in Little Cloud Mountain was the complete opposite of what she was doing now. The 2 sages had originally asked her to persuade Li Yunxin with courtesy, to bring him to Little Cloud Mountain. During this period they had said many things, such as Li Yunxin's character, aptitude, attitude towards the Freemasonry and many other things. But Jin Guangwen's conclusion after listening to them was that the Freemasonry was very interested in recruiting him. At least the 2 sages were interested in recruiting him. This demon had always been against the Freemasonry, but he was still valued so much. She really threw herself in. What kind of good days would she, the gold photon, have? Li Yunxin's talent was outstanding and full of tricks. But because she was seriously injured, she had to refine the immortal's bone into her body, and it was difficult for her cultivation to improve. Everything was because of him, but now she had to welcome him. She could welcome him. However, the one who came back was a wandering soul who had lost his mind, so she couldn't be blamed. So she used the Yukio mirror to kill him. Not only did she want to kill Li Yunxin, but she also wanted to refine him to death in the glazed golden light shield, to vent the hatred in her heart. However, after the powerful force blasted out, she immediately felt the spiritual power in her snow mountain and ocean of qi suddenly stagnated. Then she felt extreme pain in her limbs, acupoints, and meridians, as if her bones, flesh, and tendons were about to be extracted alive. This feeling, she had already experienced it once before. It was the time when the glazed sword heart was extracted. But this time, it wasn't the glazed sword heart that was being extracted, but the immortal's bone in her body. Jin Guangwen was immediately shocked. She used all her spiritual power to protect her snow mountain and ocean of qi. But at this moment, Li Yunxin had already rushed in front of her, resisting the flames. If she didn't hear wrongly, she seemed to hear Li Yunxin ask in the roaring flames, "What's next? Who is he talking to?" But she immediately remembered that a dozen breaths ago, after the demon's second incarnation exploded, he suddenly became calm and collected. He stood in the sky and talked to her, during which he even said, "Why are you in such a hurry?" Although Jin Guangzi was a little surprised, he didn't think too much about it. Because this Li Yunxin's actions and words had always been strange. Who knew what he would suddenly think of? But now that Jin Guangzi thought of this, he finally realized that the strong sense of unease he felt before was indeed not an illusion. Many details hinted at one thing. Li Yunxin's abnormal behavior seemed to be because he had a helper. He finally understood this point. But it was already too late. Li Yunxin arrived from the side. He seemed to have heard something from one of the beings he asked and laughed in the thick cloud of fire. Good, good, good. Then, his left and right hands formed a finger seal and he slammed them together. Jin Guangwen immediately felt that something was exploding in her body. The immortal's bone that had already seeped into her internal organs, snow mountain and ocean of energy, was forcefully pulled out by Li Yunxin's spell and hand seal, shattering into pieces in her body. The spiritual power in her chest stagnated and she felt dizzy. She only felt that the world was spinning and she almost fainted. She should have fainted. But fortunately she took back the glazed sword heart from Kong Tongzi the day before yesterday. But at that time her body had already refined the immortal's bone, so she couldn't refine the glazed sword heart as her natal magic weapon, so she just carried it with her as an ordinary treasure. But after all, she had cultivated that treasure for a long time so she could still use it easily and smoothly. Now she shouldn't die so quickly. The immortal's bone was destroyed and the snow mountain and ocean of chi in her body were on the verge of collapse, so she almost couldn't control the deity cloak and the cloud collector platform. Without these two treasures to protect her, how could her body compare to Long Sun's? She was afraid that she would immediately be burned into ashes by the fire. But after all, she still operated the glazed sword heart. She made up her mind, gritted her teeth and immediately fought with Li Yunxin while refining the glazed sword heart on the spot. She wanted to refine it back into her snow mountain and ocean of chi. Among all the cultivators in the world, how many people could achieve this? If the later generations knew about Jin Guangwen's move, they would definitely be amazed by her cultivation methods and unparalleled determination. But for her, it was just a strand of obsession as a wandering soul. She had already been defeated by Li Yunxin once and she was in a sorry state. If she got so many treasures today and escaped in front of more than 100 cultivators outside the mysterious light shield and was defeated again, how could she still have the face to stand on her feet? The Elder Council had never taken pity on a useless person. After all, she was a cultivator in the realm of truth and her cultivation was profound. Refining the glazed sword heart in this battle actually showed some signs of success. The spiritual power in the snow mountain and ocean of chi was filling up bit by bit, and the immortal cloak and the cloud collecting platform that were about to disappear on his body also blazed up again. Li Yunxin attacked again with 2 palms, but he only hit the cloud collector platform firmly and he couldn't hurt her at all. Just now, Jin Guangwen suddenly experienced a big change, and under the shock she didn't have any distracting thoughts in her mind, and only focused on refining the glazed sword heart. At this moment the sword heart was a little bit completed, and seeing that Li Yunxin couldn't hurt her for a while, the evil thoughts in her heart suddenly soared. This demon set her up again this time. But now that she had seen through his tricks, she sneered, Li Yunxin, you have a lot of evil skills. But you didn't expect that I'm still alive after all your schemes, huh? As she said that, she turned into the flames and dodged. She only cared about refining the glazed sword heart and didn't fight with Li Yunxin. Because Long Sun's body was strong. But in this sea of fire that was equivalent to the full power of dozens of perfected spiritual masters, he seemed to be unable to hold on. His scales were burning red and his mane and horns were also on fire. The skin and flesh on his face were scorched, and he was just an arrow at the end of its flight. Every breath he took was filled with flames. How long could he, a member of the royal family in the water, last? This fiendish demon had schemed and schemed against him, and now he was the one to blame. The golden light also laughed wildly. Good, good, good. Li Yunxin, you want to break my protective magic treasure and refine me to death. Today I'll fulfill your wish. I'll trap you in this shield, and I'll see who will die. I'll also let you taste the feeling of your meridians, bones and flesh being burned out bit by bit. Chapter 423. Since Gold Photon had made up her mind, she could only keep dodging, hoping to buy as much time as possible. In fact, the immortal bone that she had refined was destroyed by Li Yunxin. It was like her body was suddenly cut open with countless fresh wounds. Now that she had forcefully refined the glazed sword heart, it was more like she was stuffing something else into those wounds. Refining a magic weapon wasn't something that could be done in a day. But now that she was enduring such terrible pain, it was nothing more than a breath of air. The more unbearable the pain in her body, the stronger that breath of air was, and the more she wanted to refine Li Yunxin to death in her array. And that Li Yunxin didn't seem to expect Gold Photon to have such a fierce character. He had taken advantage of the time when the two magic weapons protecting her gradually weakened to launch a fierce attack, but they were all blocked. After another 5 or 6 breaths, Gold Photon gathered more and more spiritual energy, and the light from the immortal cloak and the cloud harvesting platform became brighter and brighter. At this point, attacking her again would be completely useless. Moreover, Long Sun's demonic body was also being refined by the raging true fire until it was bright red, like a piece of fine iron that had been calcined in a furnace for a long time, about to be refined. So his speed gradually slowed down, and it looked like he was indeed gradually unable to hold on. Earlier he had been fiercely attacking while saying some harsh words, but now he didn't even have the time to say any harsh words. He only held his breath and chased after him. It was like he knew he was going to die and was only relying on his stubbornness to fight for his dignity. One's loss, the other's gain. Gold Photon gradually turned the situation around. She felt the stuffiness that had been accumulating in her chest since Xianxia town finally eased up a little. She even had the time to sneer in the raging flames. Li Yunxin, are you still not surrendering? Do you think you can go against the entire Taoist and the Freemasons with that little trick of yours? Speaking up to this point, Li Yunxin gathered all his strength and fiercely attacked again. But Gold Photon only dodged slightly, and Long Sun, who seemed to be at the end of his rope, was thrown off by her. Let me ask you now, who were you talking to just now? Jin Guangzi frowned tightly. The pain of refining the glazed sword heart and the joy of torturing and killing Li Yunxin were tangled together, making her even more energetic. Thus he asked this question without expecting Li Yunxin to answer. Not going to say? Even if you don't say it, I can still guess a thing or two. Today's trip is really a pleasant surprise. If I kill you, I'll get the remnant soul of a sword saint, right? After she said this, Li Yunxin finally spoke. His voice was extremely distorted in the wind, but she could still hear the surprise in it. Nonsense. Hearing Li Yunxin's words, Gold Photon laughed even more. Back in Xianxia town, that kid beside you took away my glazed sword heart. When I return to the mountain gate, I will send someone to investigate him. It's fine if we don't investigate, but if we do, we'll find out a shocking secret. So that kid was born with a vision. Unfortunately, we didn't notice him. Some people in the sect have long suspected that the former sword saint didn't pass the tribulation successfully and reincarnated. Now I see it, it's that Yu Meng, right? Hearing this, Li Yunxin didn't say anything and just chased after Yu Meng. But now that Gold Photon's power was increasing, how could he catch up? So I sent someone to Xianxia town to investigate. They found an abandoned magic array. I think that Yu Meng took away my glazed sword heart with the help of that magic array. Gold Photon enjoyed this feeling very much. While refining Long Sun, she carefully told him his thoughts. Everything was under control. Was there anything more wonderful than this in the world? I think Yu Meng is the reincarnation of the former sword saint. Unfortunately, he was born with a mortal body. Is he hiding in your sleeves now? You're good at using this world in the sleeve spell. Gold Photon sneered. He must have taught you the spell to break the immortal bone. But now, Li Yunxin, the fire in the sword heart is surging. Can you let him out and let him take away my treasure? She said this quickly and anxiously, as if she was spitting out the words she had hidden in her heart for a long time in one breath. It was as if he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to finish speaking before he killed Li Yunxin. Why do you think I continue to take the risk of carrying this glazed sword heart with me? It's because I know this, and I know that if you see me using this thing, you'll use the same trick again. So I asked for this Taoist instrument. I used this Taoist instrument to fill the sword heart with true fire. Now even if you have a trick in your heart, you can't use it. I'll let you taste the feeling of despair and unwillingness. She finally said all the words in her heart. However, after hearing these words, Li Yunxin, who was following her closely, suddenly stopped. He stood in the rolling fire wind and was silent for a while. She didn't know what he was doing. Then he said, "You really know about the reincarnation of the sage. No wonder he has to hide." When he said this, his voice was still extremely distorted. But this tone, caused Jean Guangwen's heart to slightly pause, skipping a beat. Then she couldn't stop jumping as if there was a stag running wildly in her chest. His tone became calm again, exactly the same as 10 breaths ago. Because of this sentence, the strong self-confidence that Gold Photon had built up for herself bit by bit was like a sandcastle, collapsing in the waves. Does he still have other tricks? She couldn't help but shout, "Don't pretend to be a god. Conspiracies and schemes are always risky." Li Yunxin interrupted her. Her chest heaved up and down in the fiery wind. He seemed to be out of strength. However, his voice was still calm. This made Gold Photon not know what to do for a moment. The fear of this demon that she had secretly planted in her heart slowly rose again. She even began to think again, after using the Yukio mirror, was Li Yunxin trying to force her to use that trick as soon as possible? Only crushing the opponent's strength, is the safest thing. Li Yunxin ignored her reaction and continued in a calm and unhurried tone. "When you first met me, you were very confident in your brain. Now that you have suffered a few losses, you are still very confident. Since you like to set traps, let me tell you, what is the most taboo in this kind of thing?" Fear finally broke out in Gold Photon's heart again. She gritted her teeth and shouted fiercely, "You are at the end of the road and you still want to delay time like this. How can I be fooled by you?" After saying this, she waved her arms and pointed the sword at Li Yunxin. "Go." This was the flying attack method of the glazed sword heart. At this time she had already endured unimaginable pain to refine this magic weapon. The power of the golden light sword was more than several times stronger than before. Using it to deal with the extremely weak Li Yunxin could be said to be in the bag. However, there was no more golden light sword. The 36 light swords that appeared and disappeared mysteriously had disappeared without a trace in the raging sea of fire. Gold Photon was shocked. She made 2 more hand seals, but her spiritual power was still like a clay ox in the sea. At this moment, Li Yunxin did not move in the fire cloud. He only continued to say, "The most taboo is not being flexible and staking everything on one throw." Bah! Gold Photon was shocked and angry. She gave up the idea of using the golden light sword. Instead, she spat out a small green sword from her mouth. This kind of flying sword was a rare treasure for ordinary cultivators, but compared to the several sword saint treasures she had, it was only an inconspicuous plaything. Gold Photon shot this flying sword in one breath. Once the small sword left the protection of the celestial cloak and the cloud harvesting platform, it was immediately refined into a ball of sword energy by the fire cloud. But this sword energy still rushed forward for a long distance and hit the figure of Li Yunxin in the fire cloud. However, the figure disappeared in a flash. It was actually a virtual image. But the voice came from the other side. "You also know that I like to scheme and scheme. But do you know how many escape routes I have left and how many changes I have made when I set up the trap? Before I came here, I did not want to fight you in this camp. I planned to go to Cloud Mountain and borrow someone else's hand to kill you. But since you sent yourself to me, I will beat you at your own game." "You wish." Gold Photon's attack missed. She turned around and shot another sword energy at the voice. The figure was also hit and scattered, but it was only a virtual image. She shouted angrily, "Let's see how long you can last in this fire cloud." But the angry, fearful and frightened voice came again. "In the past, when I schemed against others, I often failed. But once I fail and realize that things are not what I think they are, I will either immediately fly away, or find another way and find another opportunity to continue the task. I just broke your celestial bone. You should know that there is a terrifying element of uncertainty in your plan. Although you can't think of everything thoroughly with a mistake of this level, shouldn't you immediately run away, or call for help from your comrades outside this light shield? But you still have the courage to continue acting according to your plan. Why don't you think, since I know about your celestial bone, would I also know about other things and how I know about other things?" After being asked 2 questions and hit nothing in succession, Gold Photon had already realized that something was wrong. But There was another emotion in her heart that suppressed the thought of running away. This emotion was like a straight and smooth track. Once her thoughts set foot on it, they would rush forward along this track. Even though she kept warning herself that this might not be appropriate, she could not jump out. Because change is always harder than habit. Chapter 424. In the secular world, this kind of thing was called going against a brick wall, or fighting for a breath. However, for Golden Photon and these wandering souls, this kind of thing had a more deadly and direct name: obsession. After all, they were only refined from wandering souls. If they didn't have obsession, how could these ghost cultivators come to be? At this time, Li Yunxin's voice came from the terrible fire. Therefore, I have to tell you another thing. Wandering souls like you are not good at playing tricks. Why make things difficult for yourself? When you are proud, you will get carried away because of your obsession. When you are frustrated, you will do what you are doing now. You will make up your mind and go all the way. When you are extreme and persistent, you will lose your mind after a few words. How dare you talk to me about schemes? Golden Photon finally became furious. She roared like a lioness, and the sword energy around her spread out, shooting countless terrible flying swords into the fire clouds. However, they all disappeared without a trace, like clay oxen entering the sea. At this moment, Li Yunxin finally pounced out of the fire. His horns, mane and scales were all burning, making him look like a flaming man. However, this flaming man's momentum was extremely fierce, as if he would cut Golden Photon with his claws in the next moment. Then he shouted again, "Now that things have come to this, why don't you think about it? Did I waste my time talking to you because I really wanted to teach you, or did I want to do something while I was waiting?" Golden Photon was furious. Finally, Li Yunxin showed up. Instead of dodging, he waved his palms to fight this powerful demon with the help of the immortal cloak and the cloud collecting platform. However, at this moment, an unstoppable and powerful palm force crashed into the mystic light shield of the glazed sword heart. Golden Photon had refined the glazed sword heart to the point of merging with its life. Just as Xianxia said, the mystic light shield merged with the body, and the Golden Photon merged with the snow mountain and ocean of Qi. However, Xianxia didn't know that Golden Photon had refined the treasure in the sea of fire. Therefore, the palm force of the profound realm cultivator was equivalent to hitting Golden Photon's body. The Dharma treasure deflected part of the force. However, the rest wasn't something that a true realm cultivator could easily endure. Golden Light, who was about to face the enemy, suddenly encountered this change. The spiritual power in his body became chaotic and he almost went mad. He spat out a mouthful of blood. However, when it rains, it pours. The demon's sharp claws had already reached him, and behind him, a huge golden god was taking shape. Bang! With an earth-shattering boom, the golden light was finally blasted away by the palm, leaving a long trail of blood in the fiery clouds. Li Yunxin had chased her for the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, and now, for the first time, he had seriously injured this sword cultivator who was protected by layers upon layers of supreme treasures. Like a kite with its string cut, Golden Light fell several tens of zhang before he regained consciousness. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Li Yunxin had arrived for the second time. How could he dare to take it head-on? He turned around and left. However, he still roared unwillingly, "What the hell did you do?" Li Yunxin laughed hideously in the flames. "I just drew two little people for your pig-like teammates to see." Little did the Golden Photon know that Li Yunxin had drawn a lifelike and miserable Golden Photon, in the middle of the violent and turbulent ocean of spiritual energy with his exquisite painting skills while she was talking and he was talking to her. Then he drew a fierce and ruthless Li Yunxin, who pulled the golden light back into the fiery clouds. When Xianxia and the others suddenly saw this scene, they felt that Golden Light was at a disadvantage. Seeing that she was in such a miserable state, but she didn't remove the light shield of the glazed sword heart. They thought that the treasure was no longer under her control, so they attacked with a palm. The palm strike of a profound realm cultivator with all his strength was enough to seriously injure the Golden Light. At this critical moment of life and death, Golden Light finally changed her mind. She knew that it was no longer advisable to trap Li Yunxin in this sea of fire. Before he was refined to death, he would probably be beaten to death by him. Therefore, she made a series of hand gestures, trying to remove the golden light shield outside. The monstrous flames here would turn everything within a radius of dozens of li into ashes, but she couldn't care so much. How could the lives of hundreds of thousands of mortals be more important than her own life? However, when she made these hand gestures, Golden Light's heart sank to the bottom. The glazed sword heart was indeed in her body, but it didn't listen to her. How could this be? Because of this thought, she was distracted for a moment. As a result, the demon Li Yunxin attacked again. Golden Light was about to dodge when Ku Chanzi's second palm strike arrived. This time, not only was her body injured, but even her snow mountain and ocean of qi were shaken. She paused and screamed in her heart that something was wrong, but it was useless. Wei River Dragon King's second heroic strike came. Boom. 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 The head of the Five Skylines sword sect was blasted dozens of meters away like a cannonball. The light of the two protective treasures on her flickered and was about to disappear. Golden Light still wanted to make a final struggle. She happened to look forward and saw the outer edge of the golden light shield. Just as she was about to separate the thick fire clouds, the light shield was hit by 3 true realm cultivators at the same time. At this moment, the hatred and anger in the heart of the leader of the Five Serpent Sword sect could almost compete with the monstrous flames inside the shield. She parted the fire clouds and finally saw the group of cultivators outside the shield. With unparalleled unwillingness, she only had time to ask, "Why did you harm me?" Then she was hit by Li Yunxin for the third time. Her snow mountain and ocean of qi were seriously injured by her fellow disciples. Her spiritual power was very weak, and her protective treasure could barely hold on. Then she was hit by a powerful true realm demon like Li Yunxin 3 times with all his strength. Who else could withstand such an attack? Golden Light felt that she would die today. But she still had a thought in her heart. That was, even if Li Yunxin killed her today, there were still a group of idiots guarding outside. He would die eventually. This thought existed in her heart. Finally, she gathered her last breath and with the determination to die, she turned around and faced Li Yunxin's palms. She said her last words, "Demon, if you kill me you won't be well." But she didn't finish her words. Because Li Yunxin's palms didn't reach her chest. What Jean Light saw was a dragon son who had returned to the perfected master realm. His body was covered with dark golden scales, and a pair of golden sword lights shot up to the sky above his head. But this was not what struck her dumb. Instead, behind him, 36 shining golden and ferocious ghost kings of different shapes and forms surrounded the sky like a group of guardians behind a majestic king. What are these things? Chapter 425. His ocean of qi and mountain of snow, which were already on the verge of collapse, suddenly collapsed. The spiritual power in his body was cut off. The 2 protective magic treasures outside his body flashed and were about to disappear. At this moment, Li Yunxin stood high in the sky and shouted, "Withdraw." The thick fiery clouds that filled the sky were instantly sucked into the bodies of the 36 ghost kings, as though they were being sucked in by a giant whale. The fire clouds disappeared so quickly that the inside of the shield was almost a vacuum. The soil on the ground had been refined into magma. Now it shot up to the sky with a boom like a volcanic eruption. Shocked and furious, Jin Guang no longer had the strength to support his injuries. He let out a breath from his chest and his body fell down like a fallen leaf. But he only fell halfway and was blasted up to the sky by the airwaves when the magma gushed out. He really became a withered leaf. Who would have thought that the head of the Kenzo Wian sword sect, who was in the true state, would one day fall into such a miserable state? And it was under the gaze of nearly 100 cultivators outside the shield. Now that the fire clouds had dispersed, they could see the situation inside clearly. Ku Chanzi's face was as dark as still water. He didn't say a word. What happened today was the biggest humiliation he had suffered in the past 300 years. He had been tricked by a demon and hurt his fellow cultivator. Although he was only at the first level of the mystic state, his merciless kung fu was far beyond that of the true state. Even so, the blue veins on his arms were slightly bulging. It was easy to tell how much he hated Ku Chanzi. The 3 true state cultivators behind him also came to their senses. They hated Ku Chanzi more than anything else. They wanted to rush in and tear the demon into pieces. The cultivators in the transcendent state couldn't figure it out at the moment. They were a little confused. But no matter what, the fire clouds had been withdrawn. The boundary of the mystic light shield of the glazed sword heart had disappeared. The watery moonlight could pass through. If they didn't touch it with their hands, they wouldn't be able to see anything. The magma slowly cooled down. Although there were still red rivers flowing on the ground, the evaporated water vapor replaced a lot of the disappeared air, making the space inflate again. Cultivators eat wind and drink dew. In many aspects, they were completely different from mortals. For example, they could use spiritual power to maintain the circulation of life force in their bodies, and they didn't need to rely on air like mortals. Just now, when Jin Guangzi and Li Yunxin were fighting in the fiery clouds, they had done exactly this. But right now, the golden light was heavily injured and the spiritual energy in its body was almost exhausted. All that was left in the shield was scorching water vapor and poisonous gas rising from the magma. There was nothing for her to breathe in. Mortals would probably die in less than a quarter of an hour in such an environment. Gold Photon couldn't relax now either. She finally fell on a burning boulder. However, the clothes she was wearing were not ordinary, so they could slightly protect her body. However, when he pushed his hand against the ground and wanted to stand up, a burst of green smoke and the fragrance of meat immediately rose from where his palm touched the large rock. But in the end he stood up shakily and saw Li Yunxin floating down. Wei River Dragon King had retracted his god-devil incarnation and revealed his white robe. Just by looking at his appearance he had sword-like eyebrows, starry eyes, red lips and white teeth. Who would have thought that this handsome man was actually a ferocious great demon? The 36 golden ghost kings behind him silently and majestically lined up in the sky. Wherever Li Yunxin looked, they all looked in the same direction. Now that Li Yunxin was looking at Jin Guangzi, they also stared at Jin Guangzi. Their eyes were ferocious and terrifying, which made people feel like their guts were going to burst. Jin Guangzi struggled to stand up. She looked into the distance. There was a group of cultivators standing in the sky, their light-colored Taoist robes reflecting the moonlight. But now they couldn't break through the barrier of the glazed sword heart, so they could only watch from afar. Maybe if there was enough time, the profound realm cultivators could find a way. But now, Jin Guangzi looked at Li Yunxin and stared at him. But after only 2 breaths, she took a deep breath and let the pitiful air in this space flow into her lungs. Then she coughed violently. What can you do to me? She coughed 3 times and said, "You don't dare to kill me." Li Yunxin looked at her calmly. "Oh, what gave you such an illusion? You're here to ask for peace." Jin Guangzi's breathing became heavier and her face gradually turned blue. This cultivator, or rather the wandering soul, had probably forgotten what it felt like to be suffocated. Now that she experienced it again, it reminded her of the feeling of being human that she hadn't felt for a long time. But this body was still useful, and she also had treasured clothes on her, so she didn't want to get out of it. Before I came here, the 2 sages had already told me. You have your own purpose. Jin Guangzi took a few deep breaths. You're alone, but you don't want to be controlled by others. So you've suffered under the internal strife of the major forces, so you saw this opportunity and planned to let the demons and the profound gate both suffer losses. Jin Guangzi frowned slightly and her speech slowed down. It seemed that the feeling of suffocation made her brain a little chaotic, and at this moment she was trying hard to recall what the sage had said to her. Long son, your brothers and sisters are eyeing you covetously, and the demon kings are also rejecting you as an alien. You can't get along with them. What about the profound gate? You don't like them even more and they have a grudge against you. So, take advantage of this battle. You'll be a double-sided spy, not only to leak information to the demons, but also to the profound gate so that both sides suffer losses and the world is in chaos. Only then will you have a chance to breathe. Li Yunxin raised his eyebrows. Oh, that makes sense. When he landed, he was dozens of feet away from Jin Guangzi, and he was standing on a slightly cold piece of solidified rock. Now that he had only talked for a short while, a few more pieces had also become cold. He slowly jumped and walked towards Jin Guangzi. It looked like the flowing magma was a clear and shallow stream under the bright summer sun, and he was walking on the blue stone between the streams to avoid the water, calm and leisurely. Jin Guangzi stared at him. As for our Freemasonry, Li Yunxin, you should be on the same side as us. We are not those stupid cultivators, nor are we those stupid secular people. It is the wisest choice for you to stand with us. You have to know. She was talking while looking at Li Yunxin. But when she saw his expression, it had never changed. He was like a real mortal walking between the streams. His eyes and attention were focused on the lava at the soles of his feet. He didn't listen to those words just now. So she couldn't continue. A strong sense of uneasiness surged in her heart again. Jin Guangzi took a step back slightly. Li Yunxin. If you kill me you won't live either. Outside, it is Ku Chanzi, a cultivator of the profound realm. There are also 3 cultivators of the true realm and nearly 100 transformations. If you kill me you won't be able to leave, you will die. I can only mediate for you if I am still alive. I am the envoy sent by the sage from Mount Cloud. They will not disobey me. But Li Yunxin still didn't speak. After a full 3 breaths he walked to the rock where Jin Guangzi was standing, 3 steps away from her. Jin Guangzi subconsciously took a step back and almost fell. You think about it, you are a smart person. Li Yunxin stared at her for a while and snorted in a low voice. When you wanted to kill me just now you didn't think about me so thoroughly. But, Jin Guangzi, aren't you curious why this glazed sword heart doesn't listen to your command? Jin Guangzi was stunned, opened her mouth and inhaled the extremely thin air. You. Her thoughts were in a mess. But she felt that this seemed to mean that Li Yunxin was indeed going to accept her proposal. At least he was willing to talk. Then, how did you do it? Li Yunxin let out a light breath, turned his head and narrowed his eyes, and looked at the group of cultivators in the distance. Do you know the origin of this glazed sword heart? Glazed sword heart was originally the most precious treasure of Kenzo. Jin Guangzi had cultivated with it for decades, and no one in the entire Kenzo knew this treasure better than she did. But now a demon asked if she knew its origin. But Jin Guangzi gritted her teeth. This is the Sword Saint's treasure. Li Yunxin waited for a while. Seeing that she didn't say anything more, he sneered. It is the treasure of the 213th Sword Saint of Kenzo, Pei Yunjin. At that time, there were a total of 36 powerful ghost kings in the world. He said as he looked at Jin Guangzi. Sword Saint Pei Yunjin ran from Mount Cloud to the ground, and subdued the 36 ghost kings. After subduing them it was difficult to kill them, so he refined them into a treasure, this glazed sword heart. This thing looks dazzling. In reality it is a sealed evil ghost. According to Pei Yunjin, he was worried that his descendants would accidentally release the evil ghost and cause chaos in the world again. So he hid an even more exquisite method to control this treasure in his head. The method he left on Mount Cloud can only unleash 10% of this treasure's power. I thought about it. No wonder you, a mere true state, could cultivate with this Sword Saint's treasure. So you only cultivated at the initial stage. Jin Guangzi frowned. You mean? Li Yunxin laughed. I obtained the true method. So now this glazed sword heart is in my hands, not yours. Your original 36 golden light swords were actually transformed from these 36 ghosts. When you were in Changji town, you used 36 of your disciples as sword spirits. Didn't you think of this? Jin Guangzi was stunned for a while and said again. Then Pei Yunjin. Li Yunxin stopped smiling and looked at her seriously. He looked at her seriously. Xumeng. Chapter 426. Gold Photon was silent for a while. But he's just a mortal now, a useless person. You didn't even dare to release him just now. Ah. Li Yunxin interrupted her. I wasn't talking to him just now. He's not in my sleeve either. Gold Photon was stunned. Then she heard Li Yunxin continue, but you killed his precious baby. And tortured him to death. Do you know what he did after you ran away that day? Li Yunxin's lips curled into a faint smile as he stared at Gold Photon with great interest. He threw this glazed sword core to me. He said that this would be my thanks for saving his 2 darlings. Later, on the way to Little Rock Canyon, he passed the formula to me. When we reached the top of Little Rock Canyon, he said, if I kill you, he will tell me everything he knows, everything about the Xian men. So you see, you've provoked a big shot. The golden photon took another step back. At this moment her body was extremely weak. His foot landed on a small pebble, causing his ankle to buckle and his whole body to fall. She hurriedly stretched out her hand to support herself on the ground. So she didn't fall awkwardly but knelt on the ground. Scorching hot air and thick poisonous fog filled her chest. She forced herself to stay awake and looked up at Li Yunxin. His Cloud Mountain. The two saints also know. If you stay with us, you'll get more than what he can give you. Li Yunxin looked down at her. But I've already promised him. Gold Photon struggled to squeeze out a cold smile. Don't tell me you're someone who keeps his promises? Li Yunxin blinked her eyes and thought about it seriously. She seemed to have a sudden realization. But what he said makes sense. I'm not that kind of person. So Gold Photon hurriedly said, if that's the case. However, the next moment, Li Yunxin's expression suddenly changed. He kicked Jin Guangwen's face and sent her flying 2 meters away. He gritted his teeth and said, but I'm a petty person. As he spoke, he strode forward and kicked her in the chest again, causing her to flip over again. Do you still remember what I told you that day? Li Yunxin suddenly acted violently. The cultivators who were watching from afar immediately shouted. The voice came from afar, but it was full of energy, like thunder rolling through the clouds. Demons! If you dare to hurt the Golden Light Sect leader, you will not be able to live past tonight. However, Li Yunxin turned a deaf ear to her. Once again he raised his foot and stomped on Jin Guangwen's head, pressing her face firmly into the boiling lava. The sword cultivator struggled with all his might like a dying fish. However, her body was weak, so how could she struggle free? Li Yunxin continued to curse. When we were in Changji town, you used my black cat demon to threaten me. Do you still remember what I said? Don't you dare touch a hair of hers. Within 7 days I will destroy your entire sect. If you dare to touch a finger of hers within a month, your 4 sects will all die. Do you think I am joking? After he shouted these words, Jin Guangwen on the ground stopped moving. When the cultivators in the sky saw this scene, they were truly stunned. This demon. He actually dared to kill a true realm cultivator in front of them, at the entrance of the Celestial Sect of Wonders camp. But in the next moment they saw an even more shocking scene. The demon Li Yunxin seemed to be stunned. He didn't seem to have expected that the golden photon would die before he could finish speaking. He suddenly became even angrier. With a turn of his palm, a misty green iron chain appeared in his palm. At this moment the cultivators all opened their heavenly eyes. They saw Jin Guangwen's soul stand up from the corpse in a daze for a moment. After the physical body died, the soul would come out of the body with a slight delay. The soul attached to Jin Guangwen's body was a wandering soul of the Freemasonry, which was far more alert than ordinary souls. But even so, it wasn't as fast as Li Yunxin's method. He shook the iron chain and whipped Jin Guangwen's soul like he was whipping an animal. He cursed. Get back. Do I want you to die? All the cultivators were shocked. They didn't know what Li Yunxin was doing. Could it be that he didn't want to kill her, but now that he saw her die, he was afraid that the Xian men would take revenge on him, and panicked. His iron chain was the chain of a young world judge. It was even more magical than the treasures left behind by the saints. And now he whipped it with hatred, and actually temporarily pulled back the soul that had left his body. Jin Guangwen's body suddenly twitched. Then he let out a suffocating gasp and opened his eyes again. All the cultivators felt slightly relieved. The true realm Taoist hurriedly shouted, Demon! Maybe you can be forgiven for repentance. Quickly send Master Jin Guangzi out of the restrictive spell, maybe. Before he could finish, he saw Li Yunxin pick up Jin Guangwen, who had temporarily recovered her soul, and put her on the ground. Then he took a step closer and stared into her eyes. I didn't kill you, so how dare you die? If you want to die, you should die in my hands. After he said that, before Jin Guangwen could say anything, before those cultivators could say anything, his palm suddenly chopped. Jin Guangwen's head instantly turned into a broken watermelon, exploding into a pool of red and white paste. This time, the wandering soul left the body and was about to escape immediately, but it was immediately tied up by the iron chain in Li Yunxin's palm. He didn't care what those Taoists were yelling about. Clouds rose between the scales and thunder and fire roared above the sky. Just like when he killed Qing Liang in the city of Wei, he used 49 bolts of heavenly thunder in one breath to blast this wandering soul into pieces. Only when the smoke on the ground dispersed and the flying ash of Golden Light's fleshly body also dispersed did the cultivators outside the shield of profound light regain their wits. This fiendish demon. This fiendish demon. One of the true stage cultivators muttered to himself. However, he simply did not know what to say. Not only did he kill a sword faction sect master right before their eyes, he also killed a sword faction sect master. After she died, he even forced her soul back into her body and killed her again just because he said, "I didn't kill you, so how would you dare to die?" How cruel and arrogant was this? If Xianxia's face was as gloomy as water before, it was now dead water. His anger was written all over his face and the veins on the back of his hands. But now, the anger had been retracted from his flesh and blood to his bones. This demon was arrogant and unreasonable. His savagery and cunning were rarely seen in this world. If he could not be killed here tonight, he would definitely become a huge threat in the future. Chapter 427. So he waved his hand and told the cultivators behind him to stop talking. Then he stared at Li Yunxin, who was standing inside the mystic light shield. They were half a mile away from each other. Mortals wouldn't be able to see clearly from such a distance. However, cultivators and demons all had extraordinary eyesight. At such a distance they could even see the expressions on each other's faces. Xianxia's anger was as heavy as a snow-capped mountain. He restrained the anger and disgust in his heart and made his voice steady and clear. "Demon Li Yunxin, what a good demon. What a vicious and perverse heart you have. You killed the Golden Light and destroyed her soul, so you do have some skills. But have you ever thought about how you're going to get out of here tonight?" His voice reached Li Yunxin's ears clearly. However, when Li Yunxin heard this, he only turned his head and looked at Xianxia. The cultivators were still covered with moonlight. From a distance they looked like small lamps hanging in the sky. Then he shook his head, smiled, turned his face away, and sat down on the ground. All the cultivators could see his smile clearly. It was a smile mixed with contempt and pity. This demon, a mere true realm demon, was surrounded by so many people, but he still dared to act like this. What did he despise? What did he pity? The true realm cultivators and the transcendent realm cultivators were immediately provoked by his smile, and they all glared at him. But Xianxia waved his hand again. After a moment of silence he said, "Who are you waiting for? Don't you think I'm qualified to talk to you?" A master of the heavenly abode of Daotong who was in the mysterious realm of Xi was talking to a true realm demon like this, which was rare in the world. He was being courteous to the wise, if it could be said so. However, this demon Li Yunxin sighed after a full 15 minutes of silence and turned his face to look at him from a distance. "Whether I'm qualified or not is another matter. But I'm not talking to you because I'm not looking for you." Hearing this, the cultivators were in an uproar. How dare this demon speak so arrogantly? However, Li Yunxin treated them as background noise and continued, "I think you are a decent cultivator. Don't you know what happened in your Dao sect?" A demon was talking nonsense about the Mystic Gate. After hearing his words, the group of cultivators in the state of the transcendent lost their cool and started cursing loudly again. However, Xianxia's expression changed slightly, and he waved his hand to stop them. After pondering for a while, he suddenly changed his tone. "So, you really didn't come here to provoke me?" Li Yunxin was not stunned by his words, but the other cultivators were stunned. This meant that Xianxia, the profound realm Taoist master, had admitted that what Li Yunxin had said was true. Something had indeed gone wrong in the Taoist sect. For a moment, everyone was speechless and didn't know what to say. Xianxia pondered for a moment and shook his head slightly. "The matters of our profound sect are naturally predestined or predestined. Even if something happens, it's not up to you, a demon, to say anything. Perhaps you are not here to seek death. But..." His expression became serious. "Since you have schemed against me and accidentally hurt a fellow Taoist, you have formed an ill-fated relationship with me. It was impossible for this ill-fated relationship to be left unresolved. Li Yunxin, if you put away your magic treasure and get out of this restriction, I can guarantee that only you and I will end this matter. If you don't die in my hands tonight, I won't pursue this matter anymore." After he said this, the group of cultivators behind him started to shout. It was nothing more than meaningless nonsense like, "Why are you talking about morality with this evil demon? How can the Golden Light sect master die in vain? Sect Master, you must not do this." After shouting like this for a while, Li Yunxin laughed coldly from inside the shield. "Ha! Ah, do you think I am stupid? A profound realm Taoist is guarding outside and I still want to go out and fight with you alone. Am I tired of living? I won't go out. What can you do to me?" Golden Light Sect had formed a mysterious light shield in the glazed sword heart, and Ku Chanzi couldn't break it for a while. Now Li Yunxin continued to use this shield, and the method he used was different from Golden Light Sect's. Sword Saint Yumeng was no longer the sword saint who cared about the world. For the sake of his loved ones he had a kind of, after I die, I don't care about the flood, attitude. Therefore he wasn't afraid of the 36 ghosts wreaking havoc in the world, or something like that, and only passed the true method to Li Yunxin. How could Li Yunxin be easy to deal with? He directly released all 36 Ghost Kings. These 36 Ghost Kings had already been mostly refined by Sword Saint Pei Yun. Their minds were muddled and they were like loyal dogs that recognized their master. Now that they were free and only recognized Li Yunxin as their master, it could be considered as the power of faith from the Ghost Kings in the true realm. This power allowed him to advance further in the Sea of Fire and return to the realm of perfected Taoist master. Therefore, this mystic light barrier was no longer the work of a cultivator or a demon. Instead, it was used by the 36 Ghost Kings. In terms of essence and power, it was far more powerful than the Golden Light. If Ku Chanzi wanted to break it, it would be no different from a head-on confrontation with the former Sword Saint Pei Yunjin. How could he win? Now that Li Yunxin was acting like a rascal, the cultivators outside were so angry that they scolded him loudly. But Ku Chanzi just smiled coldly, waved his big sleeve and took out a thin cloud. It was none other than a magical artifact for flight. He took the 100 or so cultivators up and sat cross-legged. It seemed he had made up his mind to guard Li Yunxin here. The true realm cultivator behind him frowned. "Sect leader, with your honorable status, are you really going to sit here with this demon? Why doesn't he dare to come out?" Ku Chanzi softly said, "N." He paused for a while and said in a low voice, "This golden light shield is very powerful. It can almost isolate heaven and earth and form a space of its own. You saw it just now. The spiritual energy inside the shield is surging, and the fire waves are monstrous, but we can't feel anything outside." Now this Li Yunxin. When he said this, he couldn't help but snort, because he saw Li Yunxin searching the ground and the place where Golden Light had died. Obviously, he was looking for the treasure she had left behind. This Li Yunxin is hiding inside, so we can't do anything to him. But since he's isolated it, there's no life force inside. Demons and cultivators can rely on spiritual energy to live. But now the life force inside is thin and the spiritual energy inside is also limited. He's a demon, not a celestial. If his spiritual energy is exhausted after a night, he'll have to use the demonic energy of his snow mountain and ocean of chi. If he really doesn't come out, I'll meditate here and watch him turn himself into a human jerky. After saying this, he didn't say anything else and closed his eyes slightly. That true realm cultivator calmed down a little. It was common for profound realm Taoists to meditate for a year or so. If he really wanted to turn Li Yunxin into a human jerky, it wouldn't be an exaggeration. Moreover, it wouldn't take a year or so. In such a small space, the spiritual energy would be exhausted in a few hours. If he stayed any longer, he would only become weaker and weaker. At that time, this Li Yunxin would either have to wait for death or he would have to do something else. So he sat on the cloud, closed his eyes and meditated. For a moment, all was quiet. Of course, this only referred to the inside of the golden light shield. In the thick poisonous smoke and water vapor, Li Yunxin picked up all the treasures left by golden light, and the harvest was quite plentiful. It was just that the feeling inside the shield was really not good. Even though his body was strong, the blood in his body seemed to be boiling and his temples throbbed. It was as if there was a stove slowly cooking inside his body and he was about to burst. The vitality that Ku Chanzi had mentioned was oxygen, or air, for him. This shield enclosed a large area of underground land. Now that the fire clouds inside had been absorbed into the bodies of the 36 Ghost Kings, it was as if this place had suddenly become a vacuum. The water in the lava would immediately be vaporized and the gas in the soil would also be drawn out. However, compared to such a vast space, it was like trying to put out a cart of firewood with a cup of water. If a mortal stayed inside, he would lose consciousness after about 10 breaths and then die. But, after picking up those treasures, Li Yunxin sat down cross-legged again. He also meditated. After sitting like this for about a quarter of an hour, he heard someone whisper, "What are you doing?" Although the words were a little distorted, but he could tell that it was none other than Zhou Xian. Li Yunxin closed his eyes and said, "Sit." A thumb-sized little person slowly walked out of his sleeve, using his clothes to cover his figure so that the cultivator in the sky wouldn't see him. "Sit? Then what?" At this moment his voice was full of energy, not as depressed as before. It seemed that Li Yunxin had used some means to get him out of his misery. Li Yunxin narrowed his eyes and looked down at him. "How would I know?" Zhou Xian seemed to be stunned. Standing in the folds of his sleeve, he blinked his eyes. "What do you mean I don't know?" Then he crawled out of the folds on his hands and feet as if he could speak more clearly this way. "You killed the head of a sword sect at their doorstep, and now you say, you haven't thought about what to do next?" With Li Yunxin's temperament, she wasn't suited for meditation. At this time he reluctantly sat for a while, but now he was annoyed by this little Zhou Xian. He simply sighed and opened his eyes. "I originally planned to come here to check out the situation. I would first find an excuse to ensure my safety, then sneak into Daotong or Kenzo, explain my purpose, and then do the next thing. Killing Jean Daisy was indeed in my plan. But not now, during or after the war, but she suddenly jumped out to seek death tonight. Is it my fault?" Zhou Xian was speechless by his words. After a long time he said, "I thought you had a thorough plan. But it turned out to be such a thorough plan? You killed her today just because you wanted to?" "Sigh, I often heard people say that you have a meticulous plan," Li Yunxin snorted disdainfully. "Thorough? Meticulous plan? Who can guarantee that there are no mistakes in every step of my plan? Everything has to be done according to the situation. If I can predict everything, why would I need to cultivate? I should just become a celestial." Chapter 428. As for you, he pointed at Zhou Xian. "I advise you to control your emotions. The first time I drew out another you in your subconscious and temporarily suppressed that miserable you. Then the you I drew out was pulled back again. Now I've drawn out another, but I'm not the first you have drawn out. The reason why I'm not willing to do this is that I'm actually inducing you to have a split personality. Split personality, do you understand?" Zhou Xian frowned. "What?" Li Yunxin sighed. "In short, there are two other you hiding in your head right now. If this you is suppressed again and you still want me to help you pass the tribulation, I'll draw out a fourth you. This is playing with fire. You're a sage with strong spiritual power, but I don't know where your limit is. Maybe 5 or 6, maybe 50 or 60. But..." He looked helpless and didn't know what to say. He could only spread his hands. "Control your emotions, okay, my friend?" Zhou Xian didn't know what split personality was, but judging from Li Yunxin's rare serious tone, he knew that he wasn't lying. So he took a few deep breaths and said, "Sigh. I'll do as you say. But next, just wait." Li Yunxin raised her eyes and looked into the distance. From the time he fought with the golden photon until now, only a very short time had passed. Not even half an hour. But the camp of the coalition army of the secular dynasties was already in chaos. The immortals didn't like these mortals very much. Although the two sides weren't far apart, they didn't bother to tell them many things. Perhaps it was because they considered that the opponent this time was a demon. In the face of such a magical enemy, many of the methods of the secular people were useless, including the methods of secrecy. So most people didn't know what was going on tonight. When the ignorant mortals saw such a scene and momentum, they only thought that the demons were invading. For a moment, more than 100,000 people panicked, and the camp was about to be overturned by the army. However, he didn't know that this was just a true state fiendish demon and a true state cultivator. If it was really a large-scale invasion, 99% of them wouldn't even be able to see the appearance of the demon, and they would probably die. The flames on the campsite gradually merged into one. Li Yunxin continued, "Perhaps the Freemasons are coming. Jean Guangzi said that their two sages know what I'm thinking and are willing to accept me, so they won't let me die here in vain." Zhou Xian wanted to say something but hesitated. But in the end he couldn't help but say, "What if he doesn't come?" At this point his tone did not sound like reproach or complaint, but pure curiosity. He was very curious. What kind of attitude would this sinister and cunning demon have when he fell into such a situation because of a moment of impulse? He reincarnated to cultivate the 7 emotions and 6 sensory pleasures and met many interesting people. However, it was rare to see someone like Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin thought about it. With a faint smile he said, "Then you can only die." Zhou Xian furrowed his brows in confusion. "Die? The kind of death you're thinking of," Li Yunxin said lightly. "Everyone has to die." Zhou Xian paused for a moment. "Die tonight? Here?" Looking at his expression and tone, Li Yunxin suddenly burst out laughing. Take a look, take a look. Even someone like you can't jump out of this limitation. What's so surprising about me dying here tonight? Is there anyone who doesn't die? I know what you're thinking. Everyone thinks they're the main character. Everyone thinks they'll have good luck. Almost everyone, before doing something, can't help but think of a good result and not a bad one. For example, those Qing soldiers escorting the Red Earth into the rolling mountains thought, what will happen after this trip? They always felt that their chances of survival were high. That Jin Guangzi brought a body full of magical treasures. He knew I would be difficult to deal with, but he also thought about what would happen after I killed that Li Yunxin. He didn't think about what would happen if he died. Including this Xianxia. He raised his hand and pointed at the sky. Right now he's also thinking about what will happen after he kills me. Everyone, from their own point of view, feels that a lot of luck is on their side. But the problem is, if fate is a river and people's subjective emotions and external factors are the water in the surging river, if you jump out of the river and look down on it, you will find that everyone has a lot of chances of dying. Dying 10 years ago is not strange. Dying a year ago is not strange. Dying tonight is also not strange. If everyone thinks, I can't die here, then they really won't die. How could there be so many dead people in the world? That's why I said to Jin Guangzi earlier that when it comes to strategy, wandering souls like her have a natural flaw. She thinks too much of herself. If she can't even let go of her own life and death and thinks, what will happen if I die, at every step, how can she do anything good? This is the so-called bystanders see the most clearly. So if I die tonight, what's so hard to accept? If he said these words to people in the secular world, they would probably think that it was long and boring, full of irrelevant principles. However, when Zhou Xian heard it, he was stunned for a moment. After being stunned for a while, he suddenly turned his head to look at Li Yunxin, as if he recognized him for the first time. There's actually someone like you? Naturally, he knew that people weren't the main characters that they thought they were. But even the most objective person's thoughts and ideas were limited to their own physical bodies. Because of this, they would always be affected by this physical body. They couldn't be objective to themselves like they were to others. You stand in a certain place facing a row of strange-looking people. Although they have different shapes, you know that there is a most fundamental difference between you and them. This difference is far greater than any difference between them. They are not you. But now, listening to Li Yunxin's words and thinking about the things he did in the past, Zhou Xian vaguely understood what kind of attitude he had toward himself and the world. Li Yunxin seemed to never take himself too seriously. Or in other words, in his eyes, the body that he lived in was almost no different from other people. The only difference was that his body was easier to control and was more convenient to control. Because of this, just like what he said to Jin Guangzi before and just said to himself, when he did things he was cruel to himself. He rarely thought about whether it was safe for him to do this. What he prioritized was whether it was more likely to succeed by doing this. There was an essential difference between the two. Because of this, he seemed to be able to accept his death calmly tonight, as if it was not him who died, but one of those cultivators or even many mortals. Zhou Xian used to be a sage. He reincarnated to cultivate the 7 emotions and 6 desires, and he didn't have much recognition and sense of belonging to the body he transformed into. Therefore, in Dongting, Su Wen could talk about his death bluntly without any reluctance. But even with the personal ability of a sage, he felt that he couldn't be as cold and objective as Li Yunxin. This Li Yunxin. Who on earth was he before? Heaven and earth are heartless. They treat all living things like straw dogs. Zhou Xian thought for a while in shock and finally murmured these 2 sentences. In the past, I once discussed with the art saint about the supreme oblivion. She said these two sentences. I didn't understand it at that time. I didn't understand it before today. Now after listening to your words, Li Yunxin, I finally understand the meaning of your words. Do you compare yourself to the world? The real supreme indifference. Is it another meaning? Li Yunxin was a little surprised. Who would have thought that a few words of his out of the blue would cause this saint to sigh with emotion? Maybe this guy recultivated the emotions and desires so he was more sensitive than ordinary people. But he didn't want to let Zhou Xian continue to think. It had been like this since ancient times. As long as people began to think about philosophical issues such as their own existence and value, they were always easy to get into a dead end and make themselves unhappy. He worked hard to pull out the third Zhou Xian from his subconscious and asked about the spell of the immortal bone. He didn't want to make Zhou Xian feel sleepy again, so he had to make the fourth Zhou Xian. This kind of thing, the more he did, the more difficult it would be. Therefore he clapped his hands and interrupted Zhou Xian's thoughts. It's boring to wait. I have something to ask you. Zhou Xian was still absent-minded after saying this. Li Yunxin snapped his fingers in his ear. Zhou Xian was now a little person the size of a thumb. The sound of Li Yunxin's fingers was more than a thunder to him. He fell down and slid into the folds of the big sleeve. He shouted angrily, I got to the key point. You have a lot of time to study. I will send you away before I die. But I want to ask you another question. It's more important. He took a light breath, thought for a while and said casually, you used to be a saint, so you know more about the Tao than me. Then, for example, if I cultivate the divine power of the soul transforming into the real body. If I transform into a real body and my main body dies, will my real body also die or will it live alone? Zhou Xian was stunned. Just for this? Didn't your previous teachers teach you? Li Yunxin pouted. I don't have any teachers at the moment. I've taught myself for a long time. Zhou Xian opened his mouth. He seemed to want to exclaim or feel emotional. But in the end he shook his head. Fine. Okay, the matter of the soul transforming into the real body. Let me put it this way. This way of calling it is actually wrong. There is only one part of the soul and it can't be split up. For example, after a person dies, his soul is damaged and he becomes a ghost with dementia. This can be seen. So, the soul transforming into the real body is actually not really splitting the soul. It's just a projection. You should have cultivated the Xianting true solution. Li Yunxin shook his head. No. Zhou Xian stared blankly for a moment before saying, all right. Then you must have cultivated the golden core connection contract. Li Yunxin shook his head. No. Zhou Xian frowned. You didn't cultivate either of these? Then what about the Deshang book Shuang Miaofa and Ziwei Venerable Scriptures? Li Yunxin spread his hands. I have heard of them. Zhou Xian was stunned for a full 3 breaths. Then he said, you didn't cultivate any of these things but you went to learn the Tao. You didn't go mad and die early, that's really. That's why I'm so pitiful. Li Yunxin smiled. I'm just lucky. Along with a bit of intelligence. Zhou Xian raised his head and looked at him, shaking his head several times. Who knew if he was exclaiming that this person was a genius, or that his luck was off the charts, or that he wasted his talent? After a while he sighed. Oi. I'll say it plainly. A portion of the soul is merged into your body. The other portion is hidden in the various meridians and acupoints. It was impossible for a part of this thing to be dissolved. The so-called true body is actually an illusion of a new body, meridians and acupoints. The source and foundation of this thing is still the main body. As long as the main body isn't destroyed, this incarnation is no different from the main body. This is also why when the incarnation is destroyed, the main body will suffer heavy injuries. This heavy injury isn't because you lost a portion of your soul. If you really lost a portion of your soul, you would have long become stupid. Instead, it is equivalent to the enemy's spiritual energy passing through your body, meridians and acupoints, projecting onto your main body. From this, you should know that the main body is the trunk, the foundation. The incarnation is like the branches and leaves. If the main body is destroyed, it is like the trunk and foundation being cut off. The incarnation won't work. When Li Yunxin heard him say all this, his expression was really calm, like there wasn't much novelty in it. It was like he already knew these things and was only seeking confirmation from the most authoritative person in the world. When he said this, he continued, "But if the trunk falls, the branches and leaves can still live for some time." Zhu Xian smiled. "You want to say that if the main body is destroyed, the split incarnation can still live for some time. That is indeed the case. However, this situation is also very rare. Under the true realm, one can't practice this divine ability, so it doesn't matter whether the incarnation is or not. Above the true realm, the body is already extremely strong. Ordinary small injuries aren't enough to kill. To kill through cutting the body, either exploding the entire body or like you killed this golden light, crushing the head. But the head is the master of the 100 acupoints. Once the heavy injury leads to death, the acupoints will be greatly damaged and the soul will also be heavily injured. Even if the body is still intact, the soul won't be able to stay for long. The split incarnation naturally only has the time to snap a finger." Li Yunqin faintly said, "Oh." Zhu Xian didn't say anything. He stared at him for a while, then suddenly said, "But tonight you aren't afraid of death, because there is indeed a way to survive. Isn't that right?" Without hesitation, Li Yunqin giggled, "Yes." He stretched his body and said, "It's so boring to sit through the long night. Do you want this?" As he said this, he flipped his palm and took out a wine pot. It was a silver pot, exactly the same as the one he crushed and threw to the wine shop owner outside the camp. It was small and exquisite, and there were 3 young characters on the base. Mu Nanchun. It was obvious that the wine in the pot was Mu Nanchun's unique wine. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.